called hospital evaluation.
What evaluation?
Hospital valuation.
Yeah,
Because this shareholding is in a hospital.
yeah,
And now there's an email which demonstrates the value of the shares.
yes,
And he has asked that although there are numbers,
yeah,
that the numbers not be mentioned.
yeah.
Because if he has his relatives might start asking for have some loans and all that from him.
I'm sure Mr. Smith didn't say that. But you,
Well, his creditors.
you don't have to say, mention the numbers.
Yes. Chair, I have that here, and we'll make copies.
Yeah,
And then the cross-examination, not the cross-examination, the questioning will continue on the basis
Yeah.
that I've seen the document, I've seen the numbers.
yeah. Get somebody to make copies in the meantime. You have no junior today.
No, all the time I don't have a...
Well, the officials can arrange for somebody to make copies.
I fly solo.
Well, the reverend who is here. There he is.
Can you make, for me, and for the chair, 2 copies will be fine, Chair.
Make 4 copies.
4 copies. Now, Mr. Smith, let's get this clear. The document you have shown me, it's the agreement by your company with other companies about shares. Am I right?
That's correct, Chair. There are 2 documents. The first document is what you and I maybe would call a shareholders agreement that reflects my shareholding. The second document is the evaluation of my shares at that point in 2017. That says at that point I had to get my dividends. This is what it was worth, and gives a projection for what it would be worth in 2023. So those are the documents, Chair.
I may have misheard, but you seem to say 2017. I guess you meant 2015.
No, Chair. The evaluation
Yeah,
correspondence that I received from the consortium
yeah.
is dated 2017.
Yes, okay.
Yes,
Okay.
which says, as at 2017, you are
Yes.
worth X amount of money.
Yes, yes. But I thought your evidence was that you showed Mr. Agrizzi in 2015 what the shares were worth at that time, or what they were, what it was estimated they would be worth in 2023.
No, at the time, Chair, there's a shareholders agreement
Yeah.
that says these are your shares,
Yeah,
and what the input costs were at the time, that this is what
yes.
the not shareholding would be worth, but this is what the revenue is.
Yes, yes.
And in 2017, they did the actual calculations.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
So, but I just want to make sure that I understood your evidence correctly. You didn't you say that in 2015, you showed Mr. Agrizzi documents relating to your shares,
Yes.
which reflected that from those shares in 2023, you would be able to repay him. You didn't say anything to that effect. I thought you said something to that
No,
effect.
Chair. In 2015, when I took the first out, it was just my shareholding in the development. And you'll recall that after the second payment, I did one in 2015 and did one in 2016. In 2017, when I was asking for a totally different one that we discussed, at that point, I then had this evaluation that says, look, even if we take those 2 into consideration and anything else, it will far exceed what it was. Yes, Chair.
Yes. Does that mean that in 2015, when you asked Mr. Agrizzi for a loan on your version, you didn't show him any documents that showed what the value of your shares were at that time, or what the value the shares was likely to be in 2023?
I didn't show him a document because I received that document here in 2017.
Yes.
But at the onset of the project, we all knew that this project was going to be worth so much, but I would not have had a written proof from the consortium, if you want to call it. Yes.
Because you remember, I think I did ask the question whether that is Mr. Agrizzi, when you asked him for the loan, looking at the amount involved, whether he asked you for anything that would give him peace of mind that come 2023 you would be able to pay back. I thought I asked that question, and my recollection was that you said you showed him the documents that showed that you would be able to more than, or what you had would be more than what you were asking for from him. That's my impression of our exchange. Is your impression different?
No, Chair. I'm saying we can, the transcripts will probably prove it, but the reality is, Chair, that I would not have been able to give him the rand value in 2015.
Yes.
I could only give that to him at the earliest when I received from the consortium after 3 years what I was worth.
Yes. So on that basis, would it not be correct then to say, when you asked him for a loan in 2015, there was nothing that you showed him that would have given him peace of mind that in 2023 you would be able to afford paying him back such a lot of money? Would it be correct to say that was the position?
Yes, sir. Yes, Chair, in terms of the rand value, but in terms of the quantum of shares that I held, it would have been possible to calculate it, but in terms of the rand value, I agree with you, Chair.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Nosha.
So, you're then...
I'm sorry, I'm terribly sorry, Mr. Nosha. Maybe let me just put this as well, Mr. Smith. Would you agree that reliance on shares, on the value of the shares going up over a certain number of periods, a certain number of years, would be a little risky? Maybe not a little risky, it would be risky in the sense that the share value of shares of a company can go up and down anytime if certain things happen to that company or in the market. You know, a company whose shares today cost X rands, in a week's time, if something happens, they can just go down, and those shares are worth very little after that event.
This was not the case in this particular one, Chair, because the shares were
as
not...
As a general proposition, you accept that?
As a general proposal, we accept that, yes.
You say in this case it was different?
Yes, it was not in the stock market, for instance. This was for a physical project that we knew would cost so much and bring this return.
Okay.
As opposed to a stock market where shares go up and down according to the market sentiment.
Yes. Okay.
But just following up what the chair has raised is, so you say the loan was advanced to you without Mr. Agrizzi having security at all?
In terms of security in writing or ceding something to him, no, Chair.
And without him seeing the valuation of the shares you have?
That's correct, Chair, without seeing the rand valuation of the shares we had, other than my shareholding, and everybody knows the extent of the development that was taking place there.
I see. Now, after the first request for payment, did he confirm to you that he had made the payment? Did you confirm, you remember your evidence was that the payment was going to be made in that university in Wales. Did you confirm to come back and says we have made the payment to the university?
The payment was made into my company account, Chair. And
As payment at least, I think.
both of them were made
Both of them.
to the
okay.
company, Euroblitz, that we're talking
I
about.
thought the second one was paid directly.
No, both of them were.
Okay.
So I could have, even
Yes.
on my own,
Yes.
checked that monies have been deposited. Whether he physically came to me and said, hey, listen, that transaction has now been done, I'm not 100%
can't
sure.
remember, no.
But just a cursory glance at my own bank balance in the company would have shown that there was this payment made, Chair.
Can you remember now whether you were given the proof of payment of the money?
No, I was not given proof of payment of the money, Chair. As I say, I saw it in the bank account. I get my own bank statements on a monthly basis, and in the bank statements it would have reflected that there were indeed those payments. After all, Chair, as the money came in, I immediately then made payments to the institution. So I was aware that indeed the money had cleared.
And do you confirm to the commission that even the second payment of 395,076 rand, there was no written loan agreement, there was no security given?
I confirm.
And you confirm that the amount was also paid into your company?
I confirm that the amount was paid into the Euroblitz company, and the rationale is simple, Chair. I wanted it to be paid into that account because my dividends would have been paid into that same account, and therefore it would have offset each other, as opposed to the loan being put into my own private account. It was there for audit purposes. So the money went into Euroblitz, and my dividends would be paid to Euroblitz, not to Vincent Smith. And Euroblitz then would pay the loan.
Well, I wanted to find out about that because, as I understand the position, it was a personal loan that you asked for to you as Mr. Smith. It was not a loan by your company, your company asking for a loan from Mr. Agrizzi. And you wanted it for purposes of paying for your daughter's university fees. It was very personal, as I see it. So I wondered why you would have wanted it to go to the company, which had nothing to do with it other than that you were hoping to use the money that would come from the shares in order to pay it back. But as I understand it, your right to the shares or to dividend, that was your personal, it was personal. That money would come to you, you know, and you had an obligation to pay for your daughter, and not your company had an obligation to pay for your daughter. So I was just wondering why say the money must go to the company when it could just be put into your account, personal account, and then you pay over.
As I indicated, Chair, the company for me was the most convenient vehicle for audit purposes and audit trail purposes. It could well have gone into my account, Chair. I don't know at the time, but if hypothetically my account had an overdraft facility or an overdraft, that money would have been swallowed up there. Whereas in the company never had an overdraft facility. It could be, and the company and Vincent, I mean, I was the sole shareholder to the company, so I could advance a loan from the company and then pay the fees.
Yes.
But it might be a roundabout way. But
yes.
Today I have proof that the loan has been raised, and that's how I thought about it at the time.
Yes, okay. Mr.
But if one were to look at the source of the payment, no one will see the name Vincent Smith being credited with this amount.
No, nobody would have seen Vincent Smith because the amount went into the company.
Yes. So if you didn't want your name to appear in the accounts of the company that was paying you. Paying to the company would be a convenient way.
No, it wouldn't be a convenient way because I was the sole shareholder of the company. It couldn't have been hidden that this money ultimately would be money that Vincent Smith would use in whichever way, whether it's to pay his water and lights or salary. So it was paid into a vehicle where I, and only I, was the shareholder of the company. So it could not have been a mechanism of masking who the ultimate beneficiary would have been, Chair.
But I think what the point that Mr. Noche is making, I think, is this one. That if, let us say, Bosasa had to reflect, I know that you have made the point repeatedly that you borrowed from Mr. Agrizzi, not from Bosasa. But let's say, for argument's sake, if this was a loan from Bosasa to you, Bosasa would have had to reflect that in their books. And what would be reflected is a loan by Bosasa to Vincent Smith. And the name Vincent Smith is quite well known. Public representatives, senior member of parliament, chairperson of, or former chairperson of the Correctional Service Portfolio Committee. Just that, somebody might just pick that up. Whereas if what is written is it's a loan from Bosasa to company ABC, on the face of it, you won't see that ABC is Mr. Vincent Smith's company unless you have personal knowledge or unless you have reason to go and dig up who owns this company. But on the face of it, you won't connect Mr. Smith with this loan. I think that's the point he's making.
Yes.
May I say this, Chair, without arguing about it?
Yes.
As a member of Parliament, you are obliged on an annual basis to reflect all your assets in the members' register. This was declared. So anybody who knew I was a member of Parliament, if he went and said, let's see what Vincent Smith owns, would have picked up that Vincent Smith is the owner of. Yeah, so it's out there in the public for exactly the same reason you're talking about. But I'm saying it is not inconceivable that it could be used, but the members' register is to deal with exactly that. And the members' register is public, or it's accessible to all public members, or to everybody in the public.
But somebody who just sees, for example, Bosasa books and sees the name Euroblitz or whatever the name of the company was, nothing necessarily attracts them to this transaction because at that stage, it doesn't relate to anybody in the public eye. Unlike if they look at the books and, oh, this is Vincent Smith, then they might dig. But if somebody were to say, who is this Euroblitz or whatever the name of the company, then they go and dig, then they would obviously find out that it's owned by Mr. Vincent May Smith, and then they could check in Parliament whether the company was declared and so on. But without somebody going digging on the face of it, they might just see some unknown company. You understand that?
I accept that, Chairperson.
Yes, okay.
And just to add to that, if one looks at Bosasa records and see Euroblitz, no one is going to immediately think, I must look at the members of Parliament declaration account. Am I right?
No, Chair, you are right, but may I say this without disputing it?
Yes.
In retrospect, it might have been good that I did not go to a company and I went to an individual.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Then when you looked at, you said you saw in Euroblitz account that the money had been paid. Who was the payee who reflected in Euroblitz books, in Euroblitz bank account?
Chair, the first payment was, well, not the first payment, one of the payments was a cash payment, and the second payment was a payment from a lawyer's trust account. Not one of them had any reflection of Bosasa or anybody like that, and that is what was reflected in my bank statements. So there was no ways that even if it did come from Bosasa, that from my records, I would have known that it came from Bosasa because there was no reference that made, or there was no reference made of Bosasa.
I see. And let's deal with the first one. It's 267,000 rand. The first one was 267,000 rand. And 267,667 rand. You agree with me?
I agree, Chair.
It's a lot of money to be paid in cash. Did that not raise queries with you? A lot of money. Well,
particularly when you know, as you did in 2015, one, that on your version, the person you were asking the loan from was Mr. Agrizzi. Two, you knew that Mr. Agrizzi was a high-ranking official of Bosasa. Three, a number of years had lapsed since that meeting, I think in 2011 or 2010, or when your committee was shocked by the presentation from the SIU about the corruption that seemed to be happening, which allegedly involved Bosasa. So I'm saying, as you answer that question from Mr. Noche, to say, weren't you concerned about such a lot of money being paid in cash in circumstances where you knew that on your version, this was a loan from somebody who was a high-ranking official of a company that, to your knowledge, had all kinds of allegations of corruption against it?
Honestly, Chair, at the time, I was not. In retrospect now, and going through it, as we've systematically went through it now, maybe it should have rang a bell, but honestly, at the time, it never registered either way. I want to be very honest with you, Chairperson, that yes, it could be conceived that way, but I didn't register it at the time.
Now, the second payment, you say it was from a lawyer. The second payment, you say it was from a lawyer. It was from an attorney.
A law firm.
A law firm. The second payment, it was from a law firm. Which law firm was that?
No, I know that in retrospect, Chair, from
Yes.
what I have here.
Yes.
In my records, it didn't say it was from a lawyer. I'm saying I know that only now.
Afterwards.
Afterwards, yes.
Yeah.
At the time, in my records, it just shows repayment for a car accident. That's what it says, actually. Yes. Not came from lawyer X or lawyer Y, lawyer X, beg your pardon, from lawyer X or lawyer Y.
See, I was getting there. You stole my thunder now. I was getting to this part that it must have reflected as a car accident settlement, am I right? And you had no dispute about the car settlement with Mr. Agrizzi, did you?
No, I didn't. And let's be honest on that one again, Chair. And the bank statements are there. Page 1 of the bank statement just shows the amount. It's the subsequent bank statements that would show what the references were for. In my head, I am expecting 10 Rand, I get 10 Rand, and I know it's coming from the judge, the 10 Rand. It's when these allegations were raised that I said, let me, as I did homework now, to find those things out. I was shocked when I realized that this thing was reflected as a car accident, because indeed there was no car accident due to me from Mr. Agrizzi. Mine was a loan from Mr. Agrizzi, and he was going to give me that money from his sources. I never questioned where it came from. Yes.
Would you agree with me that before we get there, let's go to page 334.
What page?
Page 334. Chair.
334.
334, yes. So I noticed Mr. Smith, when he talks about, he gives an example about judges, he limits the 10 rand and not more. I don't know what
Is
it
that
means.
connected, Mr. Noche, with why you are not on the bench?
Yes. So I must confess, I didn't expect that one. Mr. Smith, look at page 334.
I am the chairperson.
This is an email from Mr. Angelo Agrizzi at the top.
Yes, I see that.
And then it's to Mr. Carlos Bonifaccio and Andres Fantoni.
I'm sorry. Because you were talking about other things, Mr. Noche, I looked at red numbers instead of black
Oh,
numbers.
sorry.
So I went to a wrong.
Problem of putting in light notes on this. Sorry.
You see, Mr. Noche wants to continue talking about those things. Yes, 334.
So, Mr. Smith, you agree, this is from Mr. Agrizzi, and it's to Mr. Carlos Bonifaccio and Andres Tonfatonda.
Yes, that's what the communication says, Chair.
Yes. He says, subject payment trust account. And then it says, this is for specific consultant that we cannot do cash. You see that?
I do see that, chairperson.
And then
I'm sorry, where about is that?
I'm reading at the top, Chair, going down. After
This is for a specific consultant
Yeah.
that we can not do cash.
Yes.
That's an email from Mr. Agrizzi to Mr. Carlos Bonifaccio and Andres Fantoner, dated 5 August 2016. Yes, okay.
And just to pause there, you were not a consultant to them, were you?
I beg your pardon, I never heard.
You were not a consultant to Mr. Agrizzi, were you?
No, I was not a consultant, I was a member of Parliament, Chair.
Now, and then below that, there's an earlier email, so 1 minute apart. It's also from Mr. Agrizzi, and it's to Mr. Van Veek, Andres Van Tonder, and at Busasa, and then Mr. Carlos Bonifaccio, and then it says subject payment trust account. And then if you read further, it says, morning, Christo, could you please effect payment, then settlement, from the trust fund you have currently under Busasa Operations Pty Ltd account to the following account. Now he gives the account, First Bank, and then Euroblitz 48 Pty, and then he gives the amount. And then this is the account of Euroblitz, I suppose. Am I right?
I beg your pardon, Chair.
This is the account of Euroblitz.
That's the account number that I provided to Mr. Agrizzi, Chair, and it's the account that belongs to my company.
And then it's a reference car accident settlement.
I see that, Chair.
Would you agree with me that this reference and also what appeared in your statement, it clearly was hiding who the money was paid to, what was the purpose of the money?
No, I wouldn't know, Chair. The honest fact again is these documents. First of all, I was not copied in any of this correspondence. I'm seeing this as part of Mr. Agrizzi's evidence. I was not aware of this correspondence. It had never been copied to me, and I'd never seen it, Chair. So, reading it now, I agree with the Commission, but I had nothing to do with it, and I was not even aware of this type of communication, Chairperson.
I see.
You see, the question that arises is this. This is 2016 when this Mr. Agrizzi sends these emails, okay? It's not 2018 when he gave evidence in this commission. It's 2016. It is the same year when, even on your version, I would imagine, the two of you are getting well. You can approach him for a loan. He gives you a loan. He makes payment. Doesn't even insist on a written agreement. He doesn't even ask you to put up security. He doesn't even seek anything that assures him that in 2023 he will be able to get his money back. He doesn't insist on anything like that. But he writes to certain people, and he seems to wish to conceal the true nature of this arrangement. That is now, if your version is correct, that this was a loan. He seems not to want to acknowledge that it's a loan. He seems to want to hide the true nature, because you have said there was no car accident claim that you were involved in, but he says what you are being paid, the money that will be paid to your company is a settlement of a car accident. So the question is, if he knew that, as you say, he knew that the arrangement between the two of you was a loan, why would he not be saying this is a loan? Why would he say this is a settlement arising out of a car accident?
Chair, I can't speculate as why he says that, Chair. For me, the reason why I presented my company account that is auditable was because it was above board. For me, my understanding that this was a personal loan, person to person. When one reads this, it's very clear that the source of the funding might have come from a different source. And that could be one, I'm not saying it is, it could be one of those reasons, but I had nothing to conceal, and that is why it went to a company via EFT or via normal payment, which is traceable, and it was raised as a loan in my books that were audited. So I want to reiterate, Chair, from my side, it was a legitimate transaction. Otherwise, I would have found more creative ways of doing it. And I can't speculate as to why he adopted this approach to us.
You see, there are these two versions. And of course, ultimately, I've got to weigh them up and make findings. But there are these two versions. On your version, this payment was in terms of a loan, a verbal loan agreement that you concluded with Mr. Agrizzi in 2015. On his version, this was corruption. On his version, he took a stand at a certain stage for whatever reasons, and I'm sure different people would give different reasons as to why, but he took a stand or he made a decision that he was going to expose what he knew as corruption that he said he was taking place or had been taking place at Busasa. And he said, I'm not saying I didn't involve myself in that corruption. He said, I too was involved in that corruption. But I'm exposing it now. And if I must be punished, that's fine. But I'm exposing it now. This is the corruption that Mr. Watson and I and others were involved in. You will remember he came to the commission, he showed videos of cash being prepared and all of that. Now, what he would be saying is, I had to say this was for a car accident settlement so that it looked legitimate. Now, if indeed Mr. Smith and I had concluded a loan arrangement, it would have been legitimate for me to write it as a loan, to say it's a loan. I put it down as a car accident settlement because I had to look for something. And because there was no loan arrangement, I said car accident settlement. That's the kind of explanation that is possible. Do you want to comment on that?
Yes, Chair, I want to comment guardedly because I don't want to venture into
feel
speculation. But in my view, Chair,
Yes,
and
feel free to explain because I need to look at both sides and I need to hear what your perspective is on these things.
in looking at it now, Chairperson, and taking into consideration that all along Mr. Agrizzi had indicated that this was an instruction from Gavin Watson. Nowhere here does it in fact, all these instructions are from Mr. Agrizzi. So, where he sourced the funds from might have been his challenge, because I don't believe that there was a instruction from Bosasa, if you can call it Bosasa, to pay this money. My loan was with Mr. Agrizzi and not Gavin Watson. So I'm saying, without speculating, that could have been it. Because if he had said to me, I don't have cash, but I'm going to go and source cash from the company, I would have then gone to Mr. Watson, with whom I have the relationship, and asked him for it. So I was very clear that I don't want to have anything to do with the organization. I was dealing, as I indicated earlier on, I had a relationship with him from helping each other. So that was how I understood it, Chairperson. It is my version. It is something that you would have to take a judgment on, but that is from the bottom of my heart what I firmly believed in until these things came to the fore where these informations were given to us. But at that time, it certainly was not something that I was aware of.
Mr. Nosha?
Just on that, can you turn to, firstly, you turn to page 354.
354.
354.
Yes, sir.
This is the bank statement of Euroblitz. And the statement is dated the 31st of August 2016.
Yes, sir.
And you must have received the statement shortly after that date. You must have.
The statement.
The statement,
Yes,
yes.
sir.
Sorry, am I speaking softly? Sorry.
No. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sorry,
You must
Chair.
have received it shortly after that date. But go over to 355. There's an item there on the 6th August. It says general credit, domestic 3-year, car accident settlement, and then there's the amount. You see that?
I do see that, Chair.
And
Sorry, let me see where that is. You said 355.
at page 355, that is the second page of the statement, Chair.
Yeah.
And then there's an item on the 6th August.
Oh, yes. General credit, domestic 3, car accident settlement.
Yes.
Yeah, I can see that.
Now, firstly, when you notice this, there is nothing about Mr. Agrizzi here. There's no indication there's no name of Mr. Agrizzi here.
That's correct, Chair.
And then the only thing is the amount of 395,076. Am I right?
That's correct, Chair.
Now, how did you link this with Mr. Agrizzi?
Chair, I indicated earlier on that with every loan, I had given the information to Mr. Agrizzi from, in other words, the university's bill. And I knew that 300,000 rand per my arrangement with Mr. Agrizzi was due in this count to be paid over. I knew because there's no other source that would have come into this account unless it was a mistake from somebody else. So I was expecting this kind of money from an arrangement that I had made with an individual chairperson.
And then the amount comes. When you saw this, you see it's a car accident settlement. Did you not worry you that this does not come as a loan or from Mr. Agrizzi, it's come as a car accident settlement?
I never noticed that, Chairperson, and if I did, I at the time didn't reflect it. I must be honest, I didn't reflect upon it at the time, Chairperson.
But you agree with me that when you look at it now, anyone looking at this on your statement hides that the money is from Agrizzi or from Busasa. It doesn't show here.
I agree, Chairperson, I agree.
Now, in discussing the loan, what you call a loan with Mr. Agrizzi, what was the interest that is going to be, and that you are going to pay on this loan?
Chair, I've been advised by my legal team to ask you that question not be answered because it could potentially incriminate. That's what I was advised by my team, Chair.
Okay, Mr. Nocha, what do you say?
Chair, it's his right to, if he feels that the question will incriminate, the answer might incriminate him, and to refuse to answer it on that basis. But what I appreciate from him, I must say I appreciate is, unlike some other people we have had in this commission who refuse just even to come, he has come, he has answered a lot of questions, and this particular question. And this is, for me, what I would expect if he feels that it's going to incriminate him. But, Chair, I would ask the Chair to then inform Mr. Smith that the fact that he refuses to answer the question does not prevent the Commission to make a finding on the basis of what is there and of where there has been no answer.
Yes, no, I think what we'll do, Mr. Smith, well, let me say one thing that I wanted to mention. I thought it was quite a good thing you did that when you finished the commission with your affidavit, you put your version of what happened. Because of what you know had gone before, namely, there had been issues about whether you would submit an affidavit to the commission or testify, whether you would feel that you might wish not to give evidence because there might be criminal charges. Because of that discussion that had been going on prior to your finishing the affidavit, one could expect that you might not come out with your version. So when I read your affidavit and saw that you put up your version, my feeling was, that this is good, because I thought you may have taken the view that, look, I'm a public representative, I'm a member of parliament, issues have arisen, I'll put up my version, and the commission will decide what it decides, but I'll put up my version. I'll tell South Africa what my version is. But having said that, the commission would respect your right if you feel that in regard to a specific question, you would like not to answer the question for fear of incriminating yourself. So, if you say that's your position, we'll move on to another question. But as Mr. Noshe indicates, in the end, when I weigh up the evidence of the witnesses and seek to establish where the truth lies, I will have a situation where, in regard to your version, there is this one question, or there may be more questions that you might have said, look, I refuse to answer these ones. And maybe Mr. Agrizzi might have said, there's no question that I'm not able to answer to the commission on my version. I'll tell the commission everything that it wants about my version. So that's the position. But in the end, if you wish to exercise that right, feel free to exercise. That's and we will respect that.
That was the advice given to me by my legal team chairperson.
Okay, no, that's fine. Let's move on.
Now, Mr. Smith, is it correct that...
Or maybe I should just say this, Mr. Smith. I had formed the impression, and maybe I shouldn't have formed it, that your discussion with Mr. Agrizzi about the loan did not include an interest, simply because you will remember before lunch there was a time when I said, what were the terms of this loan agreement? And you answered in the way you answered. But you don't have to clarify that or anything in case it might go against the advice you have received. Okay. Mr. Noshe?
Mr. Smith, we have included in the bundle with you, before you, in front of you, starting from page 404.
Did you say we must go to 404?
404.
Okay.
Up to 424.
I'm there, Chairperson.
You will confirm, I don't want to go through all these documents, but you confirm that these contained your declaration to Parliament.
That's correct, Chairperson.
And you will confirm that in these documents, there is no declaration of a loan made either to you or your company.
No, Chair, there is on page 405 a declaration of Euroblitz Pty Limited on 405.
405, I see.
Yes, Euroblitz Pty Limited.
And just to be on record.
I think, unless I misunderstood Mr. Noshe, I think he wasn't talking about declaration of the company, but of the loan.
I was getting there, Chair.
Oh, you are getting there.
I was getting there, yes,
All
Chair.
right, okay.
My understanding, and I had canvassed it at the time, well, not at the time, but when these things were raised, was that most MPs or whoever would say, I have shares in this company, but would not put the line item.
They would not put
the line items of all the transactions,
yes,
Chairperson.
Yeah.
But in that discussion, somebody was saying, well, that was implied, that you'd put the line item. Now, I didn't put it in here, I put the company here, and people could go to the audited financial statements, and I'm just thinking from my side to give you my understanding. If that was the expectation, Chair, and I had 500 loans, I'm using it as a example, it would mean that I must put 500 line items here. That's what it would mean in practice, Chair. And that was not how I understood it, and there was that debate within Parliament. Do you put the line items, or do you say, I own shares here, and so on? And by the time I had left, I had not reached any conclusion other than saying, here's my company, and if somebody wanted to go and look at the transactions, they probably could have gone to look at the transactions. But to answer the question of the Commission, there is no declaration of that line item, but there is a declaration of the company.
Mr. Notch?
But Mr. Smith, this is not helpful, because the loan was to you, not to Euroblitz. Am I right? On your version, Mr. Agrizzi lent money to you, not to Euroblitz.
I suppose technically, Chairperson, the Commission is right, that the money was loaned to me, but it went through the company because that was the vehicle that I've used, Chairperson. So if the money was lent to me as a person, maybe indeed it should have been, I received this benefit here. But by the version of this register, I had just reflected the company.
Well, the position is that as far as Parliament is concerned, there is nothing that you did to disclose to Parliament that you had been given a loan of the amounts that we are talking about to you personally. But also, there was nothing indicating that Mr. Agrizzi had given a loan to Euroblitz. Those two statements are correct, isn't it?
They are correct, Chairperson.
They are correct, yeah.
Yes, Chairperson.
So anybody looking here, looking at these disclosures, would not see that there was this transaction between Mr. Agrizzi and yourself, or even between Mr. Agrizzi and Euroblitz. You accept that?
I accept that, Chairperson.
Yes.
And do you also confirm that you remain a committee member, even after you were no longer a chairperson, but you were still a member of the Parliamentary Committee, which on correctional services? You confirm that?
I did indicate earlier on, Chairperson, that in Parliament, I beg your pardon, you're a member, full member, or you're an alternate member. And I indeed was an alternate member that never participated because I had chaired 3 other committees. Yes, Chair.
And you were privy. You would be given the minutes of the committee discussions.
No, Chair, wouldn't be given minutes of the committee discussions.
So even in...
Would you be entitled to them if you ask for them?
Every member of Parliament would be entitled to them, Chairperson.
Yes.
Not only members of that committee.
Member. Yeah.
Yes, every member of Parliament, if indeed they wanted to participate or read minutes, would be entitled to it.
Yes, but as an alternate member, you would only participate in a meeting if somebody else was not attending. So in other words, if somebody was not there, then you would come in, or what did it mean to say you were an alternate member in the context of Parliament?
You know, Chair, any member of Parliament can attend any committee, whether there's a member or not of the committee.
Yes, yes.
I think this term alternate would mean if you need a quorum, for instance, and A is not there, you could go there. But the practice was, even if A was not there and I was not an alternate member, if they needed a quorum, you fit the quorum. But the basic understanding, or certainly my basic understanding, was that full-time members were expected to make sure that the business of the committee works. An alternate member, if and when he's available or required, should be, in other words, a reserve, if you could put it that way, Chairperson. That's how I understood it.
Yeah.
Now, Mr. Smith, the other issue here is Bosasa hired a car for your daughter.
Before you go there, because I think you are moving away from Parliament,
Yeah.
I just want to, with regard to the disclosure of the transaction between yourself and Mr. Agrizzi to Parliament, I think you said you did ponder over how it should be disclosed and whether, if you just write the name of the company, that you have got shares in the company, that's enough, or whether you should put what you called line items. Is that right? That's what you said?
That's what I said, Chair.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Now, that seems to suggest to me that the issue of this transaction was uppermost in your mind at the time. Do I understand your evidence correctly?
At which point was this uppermost? When I was filling the...
At the time of making this disclosure, I'm assuming this disclosure, or this is what, 2018? But there would be some for every year, isn't it? 2017 and so on. The disclosure in Parliament is annual, isn't it?
It's annual, Chair, yes, but...
Yes, yes. So this one that we are looking at 404 and 405, it seems it was 2018, is that right?
That's the date of it, yes, Chair.
Yes. So my question is whether, when you had to make the disclosure here, am I right to think that the question of the transaction, on your version, the question of the transaction that you had with Mr. Agrizzi, namely the loan, was uppermost in your mind as to in what way you were required to disclose it? Am I right to think that is the position, or that is not necessarily the position?
No, that's not necessarily the position, Chair,
Yes.
because as you indicated,
Yes.
this was done annually. And
Yes.
I'm sure if you went to because this company was formed in 2011.
Yes.
I'm sure if you went from 2011 onwards, this is how I had registered it. So it was not on the
not
basis
uppermost in your
uppermost in my mind. No, it's not.
Oh, okay, all right. But I would have expected it to have been uppermost in your mind, at least from 2017, because on your version, the loan was sometime in the course of 2015. Actually, from 2016. The loan transaction in regard to the 2015 academic year was in 2015, and the arrangements with regard to the 2016 academic year for your daughter was in 2016, is that right?
Correct, Chair.
So what I'm raising with you is that when you made the disclosures that you needed to make in Parliament in 2016, and I guess it's probably done early in the year, when you had to make the disclosure in 2016, I expect that you would have remembered that there is this loan that you had from Mr. Agrizzi in regard to 2015, which he had paid, and you would have wanted to disclose that. Would that not have been the position?
That was not my position at the time, Chair. Purely
Yes.
maybe from an ignorance point of view that it was in the company and the company reflected the transactions. It was not uppermost in my mind, Chair.
Yes. Excuse me. But I have difficulty in understanding why it wasn't, because my understanding of your evidence is that this was a personal loan. Mr. Agrizzi personally was giving you a loan personally for you to discharge your personal obligations as a parent to your daughter. And that it went into the account of your company that may have been convenient, or that may have been because, as you put it, the repayment would come from the dividends in the company. But I would have thought that from your point of view, if your version is correct, you would have regarded yourself as somebody who has received this loan from Mr. Agrizzi, and when it comes to you making a disclosure to Parliament, you would have wanted to disclose this loan. And you would not disclose this loan by listing Euroblitz as your company, because what you disclose in regard to Euroblitz is that's a company in which you have an interest. It said nothing about this transaction.
Chair, sitting here now, I suppose you are correct, Chairperson. But I just want to bring to your attention, and I'm not saying it is a justification.
Yes, yes.
This transaction happened after I had exited being Chairperson of Correctional Services.
Yes.
And had no influence one way or the other.
Yes.
Over the department, Chairperson. So
yes.
I'm not disputing, I'm saying in retrospect you are absolutely correct.
Yes,
but
yes.
I wouldn't want the, oh no, I shouldn't say I wouldn't, because it is your decision. From my view, was that from where I was, not being a chairperson, not participating at all, or very little, I don't think I participated more than 2 or 3 times, if at all, that it would not, I would not have had any difficulty if somebody had at the time said to me, you must declare the line item, because I didn't see any conflict, and there was no ways at that point that I was able to have a pro type of arrangement, Chairperson. That's what I want to put. But ultimately, yes, you'll have to take the decision.
But is it correct that even if you are not a member, or you are no longer a member of the Correctional Services Portfolio Committee, just because you are a member of Parliament, this was a transaction, if it was a loan, this was a transaction you had an obligation to disclose to Parliament, or not?
No, I am agreeing with you, Chair. That's why I was saying I'm agreeing
yes.
with you on that one. Yes,
okay.
Chair. Yes,
okay, all right. Of course, somebody listening to this and listening to your evidence and having listened to Mr. Agrizzi's version about this payment might say the reason why you didn't disclose it in Parliament is because it was not a legitimate loan. There was no loan. If it was a loan which you regarded as legitimate, you would have easily disclosed it. In other words, somebody might say we have a situation where on Mr. Agrizzi's side, he wants to hide. He doesn't say this is a loan. But now in Parliament, you also don't disclose it. And yet, if it was a legitimate loan, one would expect that you would disclose it if you thought there was no problem with it. What do you say to that?
I'm accepting your version of what you're saying, Chairperson. But from where I'm sitting, and I could well have been incorrect, that transaction was reflected as a loan in the company. I accept that you're saying it was personal and not a company. It was reflected, or is reflected as a loan in the company, repayable. Where I'm sitting, the fact that I have reflected it, the fact that it is audited, said to me from where I'm sitting, that this is something that I've got to pay back at some point. Whether it was Vincent Smith personally or the company, taking your point that maybe I should have reflected it personally. But honestly, from where I'm sitting, there was never ever the intention to hide or to get it in return for something else. That's just the point that I'm making. It could be the impression created. I'm giving you my truth.
Now, another point another question that I want to raise with you is this. As I understand the position, Mr. Agrizzi came up with this allegation publicly for the first time in 2018. Is that correct? Or was it when he gave evidence here in 2019? I can't remember now.
I think it was September 2018, Chair.
Yes, September 2018.
Yes.
Yes. Now, at that time, he had left Busasa, is that right?
That's correct, Chair.
And he had left Busasa after being employed by Busasa, as I recall, for close to 20 years, if not more, if I recall correctly. You might not be able to say just from his evidence, but he had been employed by Busasa for a very long time. That's for sure. Now, why would Mr. Agrizzi, who on your version had a loan agreement with you involving a lot of money, over 600,000 rand, say to the Commission and to the world, there was this money that was paid to Mr. Vincent Smith. Effectively, it was part of corruption. When, by saying that, it would mean that he's not going to be entitled to demand this money back from you. And yet, if he didn't say this was corruption money, and indeed, as I recall, in documents that are in the bundle, when he heard that you had said in Parliament this was a loan, he said, no, it was not a loan. But if he said, no, Mr. Smith is actually true, this was a loan, or my memory has been jogged, this was a loan, then he would know that in 2023, he's going to be entitled to demand a lot of money from you. But if he continued to say, no, it was corruption money, he would be depriving himself of getting this money paid back to him. It seems strange that somebody who knows himself to be entitled to this money being paid back to him because it was a loan would actually denounce it and disentitle himself to the payment of this money. Well, what do you say to that?
Chair, I don't know what was the motivation by Mr. Agrizzi, why he did or why he did not do that.
You can understand the logic that you would expect that if somebody has given somebody a loan, and especially such a lot of money, that one would expect that they wouldn't do anything to disentitle themselves to the repayment of that money. And yet, his version means that he can never demand that money from you.
Except, Chair, if he himself knew that it was not his money. If
yes.
he himself knew that.
Yes.
And that's why I'm saying I'm
yes.
reluctant to get into that argument because
yes.
because I don't know what was the dynamics. In fact, at the time, as you say, he was no longer an employee.
Yes,
Yes,
of
so I
SARS.
don't understand what caused
Yes.
that, Chair, so I don't want to venture into that,
Yes.
into that area. Chair.
Yes, yes. Of course, he, as far as I know, as I remember, of course, he doesn't say it was his personal money. He says it was Busasa money because he says he was instructed by Mr. Agrizzi to effect the payment. That's what he says. But you have said what you have to say on that question. Is that right? Mr. Nosher?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, before I move to the topic I was going to start with, Mr. Smith, I'm handing you back the document you gave me.
Thank you.
This is the copies we've made. Unfortunately, we have not stapled them, but we'll deal with, or they are stapled, we'll deal with them. Bearing in mind what the request of Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith, only thing I want to raise with you is this. At the top, there's a single document, a single page that flies on its own, which is...
Which document, sir?
Okay.
The document that you gave?
Yes.
Yes.
The hospital valuation.
Yes.
Now, it seems as if someone made an entry by hand to reflect 23. Am I correct?
That's correct, Chair.
Was it someone wanted to doctor this to be in line with what you were saying, that this will mature in 2023?
No, Chair. I'm sure if you went to the source, you would probably be able to find out that was not my... We received the document in that fashion.
I'm sorry. Mr. Nosher,
Chair.
shouldn't we paginate these documents first? Are you looking at the covering letter or at the actual agreement?
Chair, they don't go together, although they are about
okay.
One is standing alone,
Or
and the agreement standing alone.
Are you looking at the email or letter?
The
dated
email, yes.
17
November.
17 November. Okay, all right.
Yes.
I see that I think you must first read what is said there and then indicate what is handwritten and what was typed first before.
Chair,
you ask the question.
the email is dated Thursday, 16 November 2017. It's from Brian Landman at Waterfall to Mr. Vincent Smith at ANC.
Maybe before you proceed, who is Brian Landman?
Those are the accountants of the consortium, for want of a better word, Chairperson.
In which you have shares?
Yes, of that, yes.
Yes, okay. Okay. Maybe I must just get this clear. The shares are that you were talking about, from which you are going to get money to pay back Mr. Agrizzi. It's not shares in Euroblitz. It's shares in some other entity, or the position is that Euroblitz has shares in another entity.
Chairperson, there's a holding company that was called Waterfall Investment Company.
Yes, yes.
It had 3 shareholders, as you see on that agreement.
Yeah.
At the bottom.
Yeah.
And Euroblitz was one of those 3 shareholders.
Okay. Now I understand. Okay, Mr. Nosher, then you can read and Mr. Brian Landman was an accountant.
Was an employee for WIC, the top company.
Oh, okay, all right. Thank you. Mr. Nosher continues.
And then he writes, "Hi, Vincent. I apologize for the delay. I have discussed detail with Werner this afternoon. Werner confirms that dividends will only be distributed once all loans have been settled. This would be August 2026. Then there's a line drawn across. Then it says dividends would obviously be payable only after annual income tax is settled by the company to SARS for each year. Then there's a handwritten 23. It says 5% equity evaluations as at November 2017. Then it gives the valuations. So my issue is about August 2026, which seems to have been crossed.
That was not my adjustment, Chair. Chair, I beg your pardon. I'm saying it would have been done there. And I'm saying that, Chair, because there was always clarity that the repayment, there where it says less debt, was always going to be, if you look at the net asset value box, the bottom, the second, or the table, let's put it that way there. It was always our understanding that that loan would take 12 years, and that is why I indicated earlier on that it's a long-term loan, Chairperson. So if you took, and we can verify it with the authors, if you took the time that this thing was agreed upon in 2011, and you added 12 years, it would come to 2023. So my answer to you is that that adjustment was not my adjustment, and it can easily be verified by the authors of this transaction. Not a transaction, the authors of the email.
Well, the year 2026 is crossed out, and you skip a line, and below the next line, the number 23 is written. It seems to me that you have understood that 23, and it doesn't say 2023, it just says 23. You have understood that 23 to have been intended to be 2023. Is that right?
I understood it, and that is what I received from Mr. Landman when I spoke to him. Yes, Chair.
Yes. Did you ever speak to him to clarify that, or you left it on the basis that that's how you understood it?
I left it on the basis that's how it is, Chairperson, because this is not even financial statements. As a shareholder, you're entitled to financial statements, so it would have been at the next financial statements clarified. Yes. This was just for me to say where I am now, but I'm sure the financial statements would have shown differently, and the audited financial statements are there. Yes. And as a shareholder, I'm entitled to the books. Yes. So that is easily available. And if you wanted it as a commission, I'm sure we could source it and give it to you. Yes.
No, I think if there is some document that would show that this 23 was meant to be August 2023, I think that it would be, you might wish to provide that. Or if there are other documents on the basis of which one can say, if this document says August 2023, then August 2023 is what must have been meant here. That's fine as well.
I'm sure we can source it from WIC, and if they have it, I'll make it available, Chair.
Okay. Mr. Nocha, continue.
Thank you. Now, you received this document on the 16th of November, 2017, am I right?
Correct, Chairperson.
Now, how could you have told Mr. Agrizzi that you will pay him in 2023 if you received this only in 2017? How could you have told him in 2015 that he will receive his money back in 2023?
Chairperson, we signed the shareholders' agreement in 2011. And at that time, it was clear to all of us, in fact, it was indicated to all of us, maybe not here, that it's a 12-year agreement, Chairperson. And I'm saying that information, I haven't gone through this to see if it was there, but that information is attainable. That you can expect after 12 years, ordinarily, that that the input costs would have been covered and you'll start getting dividends. That was made clear to us, Chairperson. And it was on that basis that I made that assessment. But again, if we wanted something to that effect, I'm sure we could go and get that confirmation. I was very clear. And let me put it to the Commission. that when I participated here, I knew that this was when this money was going to become available so that I could fund my daughters. This was, in fact, for prosperity for my children. So I knew that this was the time frame that ordinarily, unless there's a crisis, you could expect the returns to come. That was discussed even when we were agreeing to the shareholding. That, look, guys, it'll take you about so long before we start seeing dividends. That was the basis of the shareholding agreement, Chairperson.
All right. Now, Mr. Smith, let's move on. You do not dispute that Busasa hired a vehicle that was used by your daughter, all right?
I don't know, Chair.
You don't dispute that?
No, I don't dispute that.
And
Sorry, it doesn't dispute what?
that Busasa hired a vehicle
Oh, yeah.
that was used by his daughter.
Yeah.
You don't dispute that, Mr.
No, I don't dispute that, Chairperson.
And without wasting time, you will not dispute that you didn't disclose that to Parliament, that you got a benefit from Busasa in the form of a vehicle hired for your daughter.
No, I didn't declare it, Chair, but just to put context,
Yes.
and I'm not disputing it.
Yes.
It is in my affidavit that my daughter came home from school. I had approached a friend, listen, give me a little run around, and I'd approached Gavin Watson for it. I received it, Chairperson, that little run around, and that's what I'm saying. At the time, it was no indication that it was going to be a rental car. There was no indication. Today, after not today, but after the invoices that were given to me, I then, not even after the invoices, when we went to get the car, it became clear that this was a car that was rented from wherever. And yes, to answer his question, I did not declare that I had received this benefit in kind. No, I didn't say.
And this one you knew it was from Busasa. It was not from Agrizzi, it was from Busasa.
This one I knew was from Gavin Watson, Chairperson, a friend of mine who had, in fact, in the past helped me all along. And in fact, when I raised it with him, he had indicated to me, listen, man, if it happens again that you need it, let's have a discussion. So I had approached Gavin Watson as I would normally approach, and he had given it to me, Chairperson. And again, I never asked him whether he's going to source it from the company or whatever, but now when you look at the Blake invoices, it's clear that it came from there.
Let's talk about the distinction you emphasize repeatedly about whether it's the company or an individual. The fact of the matter is, I think somebody gave evidence, or I read somewhere, that Mr. Gavin Watson was, for all intents and purposes, Mr. Busasa. You know, legally, Busasa is a separate entity, was a separate entity, but as I understand, I think somebody's evidence here that really everyone knew that Mr. Gavin Watson was Busasa. Now, of course, once you got to know Mr. Agrizzi, my expectation is that you also knew that, as I see it, it looks like Mr. Agrizzi was Mr. Gavin Watson's right-hand man in the group of companies. So I'm not sure that if you were asking for a benefit of a financial nature or any benefit from Mr. Agrizzi or Mr. Gavin Watson, in your own mind, being aware of all the allegations of corruption and relating to Busasa that you had been told about in the Correctional Services Portfolio Committee from around 2010, 2011, that you ought to have been seeking to make a distinction that this benefit that I'm asking for, I'm getting from Mr. Gavin Watson and not from Busasa. This one I'm getting from Mr. Agrizzi and not from Busasa. Because if Busasa, if the allegations, the serious allegations of corruption that you had heard about relating to Busasa were true, what are the chances that the top people at Busasa would not have been involved in that corruption? Because companies act through human beings. They don't act on their own. And therefore, I would have expected that if, because of the allegations of corruption that you had heard over the years about relating to Busasa, you would be concerned to get any benefit from Busasa. I would have thought that even a benefit from Mr. Gavin Watson, whom you had known for some time, you would be concerned because he was effectively, the owner, one of the owners of Busasa. What do you say to that kind of thinking?
So I distinguished between the individual and the company, as you said, because even earlier on when I said that Euroblitz and Vincent Smith, you said to me, but one is personal and one is the company.
Yes.
It's
no,
what you,
that's
I beg your pardon, it's what the
Yes.
commission had said, Chairperson. So long before I knew, or long before, for instance, these things came out of SIU, I had a relationship with Mr. Watson, and I would have dealt with him at that level, Chairperson. And I, if I had time, I would look, I think even somewhere, where I raised, and I think it was the documents that came last night, Mr. Agrizzi somewhere said, look, this I was not doing on Bosasa or anybody else doing it as me. So everybody distinguished, whether for convenience or otherwise, to this is me and this is the company, and this is me and this is the company. In my case, I am not sure, and I am not sure that is the commission suggesting to me that I would, for however long, not be able to have a relationship in terms of being assisted by somebody who might, at company level or wherever, because I don't know that, Chair, but I am just saying to you, from where I'm sitting, I made that distinction very clearly, that I have a personal friend called Gavin, who in the past I would go to and say, give us T-shirts for the ANC, you would do it from the company. I want to reiterate, Chair, that now that we're having this honest and frank discussion, in retrospect, the lines were blurred, or possibly were blurred. I want to make that upfront. I don't want to fudge that, Chairperson. I want to be upfront with you that hindsight is always where one learns.
Yes. No, that's fine. Maybe I would just add this just to underline something about making the distinction between a personal relationship or somebody as a person and, for example, their company. You have a company called Euroblitz, and you are the sole shareholder in that company. If there are all kinds of allegations of corruption that your company called Euroblitz is alleged to have been involved in, even if you were my friend, I would think that, I need to think carefully about this relationship, because there are all these allegations around this person, which, if true, mean that he's a very bad person. Now, maybe, I don't know if it's true or not, but I would be concerned about being seen to be friends with this person who is alleged, let us say for argument's sake, to be a bank robber and all kinds of things. You see. So if your company and you are the sole shareholder, I make an example, there are all those allegations, I might want to create some distance between myself and yourself, even if before those allegations came up, we were quite close. Because what if they are true? It looks like maybe during the day you are such a nice person, but you do all kinds of wrong things. One day they might be proved to be true, maybe not true, but it's something that I would imagine would concern me. Of course, it depends what the allegations are. Some allegations, might not be so serious, but so I'm just saying that in a certain situation, you might say, look, I'm not going to be drawing a distinction because, for example, Mr. Smith is the only shareholder of this entity. So if these things are true, there is no way he's not part of it. You might wish to say something on that, or you might not wish.
Nothing other than to say, I take your wise counsel, Chairperson.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Tell me, is this the view you hold? Is that why you did not disclose to Parliament that you are friends with Mr. Kevin Watson, whose company was involved in these alleged corrupt activities?
Could you please repeat the question, sir?
Is your view that there's a distinction between Mr. Watson and Busasa the reason for not disclosing to Parliament that you were friends with Kevin Watson?
No, it's not my view, Chairperson.
Did you disclose?
Yes, I'm not sure whether there is an obligation to disclose friendship in Parliament. I think there is a disclosure to...
Let me put it the other way. You saw in the portfolio committees that there was discussion about Busasa, am I right?
I was aware please repeat your question.
You were aware that the portfolio committee on DCS, Department of Correctional Services, was discussing now and again the issues of Busasa.
I was aware, I was part of it, yes, Chairperson.
But did you disclose then to the members of the committee that this company is owned by a friend of mine? When I say mine, I mean yours, but I'm not friends with Kevin Watson.
No, Chair, I didn't disclose that. And I have friends that own, and I'm not justifying it. I'm just trying to follow the logic that if this particular one, I agree, has this problem, but I didn't disclose it because there was no need for me to, not there was no need. I'm saying I never disclosed any other friendship, and I don't think any other member of Parliament does it. So to answer your question, no, I never disclosed it. And again, I'm saying, Chair, my understanding is that even if he was my friend, with the doctrine of separation of powers, a member of Parliament is unable to influence positively or negatively the operations of the department. Yeah. I never saw any conflict at that level. Yeah. And depending what the Commission is asking me, it makes it even more pronounced for me if these transactions happened after I had ceased being I was still a member of Parliament, but I had ceased any active role in direct oversight over the committee chairs. That is how I understand it.
Sorry, just to be clear, Mr. Smith, are you saying a member of Parliament is entitled to sit in a portfolio committee meeting wherein issues are discussed about the company, serious issues of corruption, are discussed about a company who's one of the directors is his friend, you say that member of parliament is not entitled, is not obliged to disclose that to the portfolio committee members?
No, Chairperson, and again, I could be wrong. I think that my obligation to recuse myself, because I think that's what is being alluded to, is only when there are decisions or whatever, but in the broad general discussion, it happens in Parliament, Chairperson, so would it then automatically mean that when there's a discussion of this matter in the National Assembly, I understood that if there were to be decisions taken, that I must declare and or recuse myself, Chairperson. But if it was a broad discussion in a committee, I could be wrong, but I didn't see the need to say, by the way, the company you're talking about, I have friends that are directors or shareholders in that company, Chairperson.
I see. Now, the Chairman, let me move to another item. The issue of...
I'm sorry. The issue of Busasa hiring a car or cars for your daughter, I think to be complete, we need to, Mr. Noche, need to cover the question of, was that a once-off thing or did it happen over a certain period of time? Mr. Smith, do you want to just talk to that? As far as you know, how often did that happen?
It happened 3 times, Chairperson, and
how many times?
3.
3 times.
Yes, I speak under correction, but I think that's what is here. And it was, my daughter would come home twice a year.
Yeah.
Mid-year for them, that side.
Yeah, from overseas.
And yes, mid-year and end of the year.
Yes.
And it happened for 10 days when she was here in mid-year, and so it was there were 3 invoices, let me put it that way.
Yes.
Yes, Chair.
Well, I had made a note somewhere. I picked up either 3 or 4 occasions when, in terms of the invoices from Blake's Travel, which was the travel agent used by Busasa, and on some of the occasions, at least some of the occasions, I don't know if it's all of them, the period during which they hired a car for her was about a month. I think there is one that was from 11 June, I think 2016 to 11 July 2016. There was another one that was, I think, sometime in December, I don't know whether 2016 or 2015, to January the following year. So does that more or less reflect your own understanding, or is that something you have not looked at closely in terms of how long the periods?
No, Chair, we can look at page 464. It was 17 days.
464.
Yes.
Sorry.
It is the
1 second, Mr.
464, Chair, yes, the black 464.
One second. Yeah. Okay. 464, you said?
464, Chair.
Okay.
I'm just using that one because I had remembered it was there.
Yes.
But
yes, I'm at 464.
17 days, Chair.
That one is 17 days.
Yes. And
yes, I think I saw one that is 17 days, but I certainly saw either one or 2.
Can I just...
that was 30 days or so.
Can I expedite this by referring to them, and then we can just
let's do
collect
that.
all of them. Mr. Smith, turn to page 381.
381.
381.
Oh, yes, yeah.
I'm the Chair.
You see, there, Mr. Smith, is the invoice BT 26840. It's from the 11th of July 2016 to 5 August 2016. You see
That would be about 3 weeks or
Yes,
what?
Chair.
Yes.
About 3 weeks.
3 weeks, yes, Chair. Her
Or
year,
yeah, about 3 weeks or just over 3 weeks.
It's about 25 days.
Yeah, and according to that invoice from Blake's, that seems to have cost Busasa 7,954 rand 8 cents. Is that right?
that's correct,
Can you
that's
see
the
that?
invoice, Chair.
Yes.
And then the next invoice is invoice on page 384. And it's invoice BT 28727. And it's from the
18th December.
18th December to 5 January.
18 December 2016 to 5 January 2017.
Yes.
Maybe that's another about 3 weeks as well.
17 days.
Yes,
Yeah, 17 days. And that's the total of in that invoice, that seems to have cost Busasa 12,444 rand 83 cents. Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Take us to another one.
Sure, it's just bear with me. And then the following one, well, this is a small amount for a fine on 385. That's merely a fine. Bear with me. Then there's the next one. There is at page 395.
Well, before 395, you have got 392.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon, 392.
That one is for the period 11 June 2016 to 11 July 2016. I think that's the one I was saying was 30 or
Yes.
31 days, I'm not sure.
Yes,
Can you see that one, Mr. Smith?
392.
yes.
Page 392, yes.
Yes, Chairperson, I'm there.
That's 30
Yes.
days.
Can you see that one is for about a month?
Correct, Chair.
Yes, and the amount is 9,151 rand.
91 cents.
98 or 93 cents, I think
98
Yes.
cents.
Okay. Is there another one?
No, there's no, the 395 is just the invoice from Avis.
Yes.
But it's for that invoice
Okay,
at 392.
okay. I don't know what the total of those amounts is, but it should not be difficult to work it out. It might
No.
be about, 20,000?
It was about 26,000, I saw somewhere, Chair. It was
Or about 26,000?
I speak under correction, but it was about
Yes.
22,000, something
Okay.
like that, yes. Chair.
Okay, no, that's fine. Yes, Mr. Noche, you may proceed. But you wanted to move away, or you have?
No,
some
I was
question?
about to move away from
Okay,
this.
okay.
But the record is
Yeah,
plus about 26,000 rand you didn't disclose to as a benefit.
Correct, Chairperson.
yes. I want to put this also. The thrust of Mr. Agrizzi's version is that from a certain time, Busasa was looking after you. I'm using those words. I think we all understand what they mean. And he says, in support of that version, he says, one, initially Mr. Smith was not entertaining us as Busasa and yet we wanted to talk to him so that from the Portfolio Committee on Correctional Services, he could make sure that the tenders that we were getting from correctional services did not stop. But he was not entertaining this idea, was not interested in meeting us until we had to speak to Mr. Frolick. And then Mr. Frolick approached him. And from a certain time, he changed his attitude to us. And then he says, Busasa paid him 45,000 rand a month or whatever the amount is, he says. We paid, that's what we paid him. And we paid for his daughter's university fees. And we hired cars for his daughter. Now, if you look at the part relating to them hiring your house for your daughter for these kinds of periods and not charging you, one might say that does appear to be people who are looking after you. What would you say to them?
So we canvassed the first part. I don't know which part you're asking about, but the first part, let's start with that part.
Yeah, no, the first part we have dealt with. I'm talking more about their conduct in extending this benefit to you through your daughter. If there's anything you might not have.
No, there isn't anything I want to say, Chair,
Yes.
except that, Chair, if, and we can do the sums. I think it was 26,000 rand or 22,000 rand.
Yes.
Honestly, if they were looking after me in any other way, it would be easier to take that money and pay this so that there's no track record about it. Chair. It was an honest a run around for my daughter. You gave that to me. If it was anything else, as Mr. Agrizzi says, they were looking after me, I would have used that looking after whatever to do it. That's all that I want to say on that one, Chairperson.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Now, there is no dispute. You don't dispute this. That Busasa installed security cameras at your place, and after there was a break-in. Am I right?
That's correct. Chair.
And you didn't pay for that.
Beg your pardon?
You did not pay for that, or did you?
Chair, when the incident happened, I had canvassed at least 3 individual or organizations for quotations, one of which was Gavin Company. He made arrangements for Mr. Leroux to come and do a site visit, like all the others did, and to return a quotation to him, which was done in terms of him doing the site visit, Chairperson. A few days or a week, I'm not sure how the time frame is, but they came to do the job. At the completion of the job, I requested Mr. Watson for the invoice. Not only then, on at least 3 other occasions, Chairperson, I had asked the late Gavin Watson to provide me with the invoice because the job had been done. So it was not that it was a freebie. I had requested for an invoice from Gavin Watson, which was never forthcoming, Chairperson.
And by that time, you knew when you asked for this service that this was a company that had been alleged to be involved in corruption, and which issue had been brought before the portfolio committees. Am I right?
Chair, you are correct, and I will, and please forgive me, Chairperson, and maybe if I'm wrong, you indicate it immediately so that I don't return to it, Chairperson. When this incident happened, I was no longer active in the committee. I had no ways of benefiting the company even if I wanted to, Chairperson. And therefore, I didn't see it as any risk from a conflict point of view, Chairperson, because I had no direct oversight over the company, and even, not over the company, yes, at a parliamentary level, Chairperson. And even if there was, my contention is the separation of powers doesn't allow MPs. There could be a conflict of interest because it's in the committee you're working with. But, Chairperson, there was no ways that any member of parliament could influence it, because then it means anything that comes to the National Assembly, MPs would be reluctant to do it because you might be doing, and I'm being maybe facetious about the whole thing, Chair. If you went to go to the bank, do you worry that the bank, because you do business with it? So in my case, my reasoning was, I have no direct responsibility where I can influence it one way or the other. Secondly, the separation of powers doesn't even allow it, even if you have direct responsibility. So there was never an intention that I'm doing this for you because in return you will do that for me. That was never, ever on the table, Chair.
Of course, one could have a situation where a company that wants to engage in corruption and benefit from corruption in a government department, for example, where such a company could have certain people both inside the relevant department or outside, which could include Parliament, for argument's sake, where they would say, look, do this for us to make sure we continue to enjoy these benefits. This is where we think you fit in, you know. And we'll look after you. Maybe we won't look after you now because it might be difficult, but we'll look after you after you have left here. Theoretically, that's possible. Or they might say, we'll give you something now, but even after you have left, we will continue. In this regard, I make one example. The evidence that I've had includes, in regard to Bosasa and the Department of Correctional Services, includes evidence from Mr. Agrizzi that says Mr. Gillingham was working for the Department of Correctional Services. They talked to him, and for a long time while he was an official of the Department of Correctional Services, he was working with them to make sure that they got certain contracts and so on and so on. When he left the Department of Correctional Services, they continued to look after him, even when, therefore, he could do nothing for them anymore. Actually, if I remember correctly, the evidence from Mr. Agrizzi is that when he left the Department of Correctional Services, they were paying him a certain amount per month. But after he had left, he said, you see now that I've left, you people have got to increase the amount in order for me to, I think, get effectively what I was getting before I left. And according to Mr. Agrizzi, when he left Bosasa, they were continuing to make that payment. So I'm just saying, theoretically, you could have that situation. You understand that?
Yes, I accept that theoretically.
It might not have applied in your situation, but theoretically you could have.
Absolutely, Chairperson.
Yeah, okay.
And then, Mr. Smith, when the newspaper got wind of these payments to you, why did you deny that the security features like CCTVs were installed by Bosasa at your home?
I think, Mr. Nosher, it's better that we refer to these newspapers first. I think you are referring to page 346.
346, yes.
Yeah, 346, Mr. Smith. Have you got that? Have you got page 346? It's got your picture and there's somebody else next to you.
Yeah.
Have you got page
Oh, I beg your
346?
pardon, sir. I'm sorry, yes, I am there. I beg your pardon,
all
sir.
right. Now, that, I don't know from which newspaper that is, but it says opinion there, and at the top it reads, must read. Then it says Vincent Smith's response to Bosasa payment claims is dated 4 September 2018. Then it's got your picture and somebody else next to you. And below your picture it says, Vincent Smith says he borrowed nearly 600,000 rand to pay his daughter's tuition fees. And then below that it says ANC MP and co-chairperson for Parliament's Constitutional Review Committee, Vincent Smith, responds to allegations that he was irregularly paid 670,000 rand by Facilities Management Group, Bosasa, over the past 3 years. Then it says, in the light of the allegations that were made in the media over the past weekend, I have since consulted with the leadership of the ANC in caucus. We are all in agreement that I am obliged to respond. I confirm having entered into an agreement for a personal loan with Mr. A. Agrizzi, which is repayable by me. This loan was processed to me in 2 separate payments, an amount of 220,000 rand in 2015 and 395,000 rand in 2016. The loan was for the university tuition fees of my daughter in year 1, in brackets 2015, and year 2, in brackets 2016. Then the next paragraph, and that's the one I think Mr. Noche was talking about. I deny any further assistance, financial or otherwise, including the installation of CCTV cameras at my home from him or any other person or company. The cameras that are at my home were paid for by myself. Do you know what newspaper that is or what publication that is?
No, I don't.
You don't know? Yes. Did you see this publication at some stage in 2018?
Did I see this publication at some
At that
stage?
time, in 2018, this article?
I don't recall, Chair, but I could have seen it. I don't recall, Chair.
Okay, all right. What do you say? What do you have to say about the content of what I've just read?
Chairperson, this report apparently was in, the date there is 20.
I'm sorry, Mr. Smith. Actually, it continues in the following page. I didn't realize that. My sole directorship of Euroblitz 48, a company through which the loan was processed, is fully declared in the register of members' interest, and this has been the case since the acquisition of the company. I'm in total support of being held accountable, and I therefore welcome any investigation into my personal loan transaction. I will fully participate in the parliamentary process led by the Ethics Committee, a process which I have no doubt will absolve me completely. I'm also going to present myself to the ANC Integrity Commission at their earliest convenience in the interest of being held accountable by my own organization. And then it continues. At the end, it says this is the unedited text of the statement released by the ANC on behalf of Vincent Smith. Do you want to comment on this statement or article?
Indeed, Chair, I'm saying if we started with the page 2, for instance, that all happened, Chairperson.
It all happened.
Yes, I'm saying page 2 that I'm
Yes.
sole director,
Yes.
I voluntarily stepped down and so on.
Yes, yes.
Everything on page 1, I also agree to say. That last statement, the last paragraph
Yeah. On page...
on page
346.
1, what I'm calling page 1.
Yeah, 346.
On 346, I beg your pardon, that's what I should say, Chairperson. In 2018, and even as I speak today, the CCTV equipment is equipment that I had installed and paid for, Chairperson. Yes, that's my understanding, Chairperson. In 2018, it was equipment that I had installed. Now, so that we don't maybe have a fight about it, if you read it there, it says, I deny the installation of cameras at my home. I mean, if I'm paraphrasing that one, that last line, yes. I deny the installations at my home. There were indeed installations at my home initially, as I indicated, which after a while I've asked them to remove. And I put my own cameras, which are there now, Chairperson. That is the state of affairs.
But the ones that you admit as having been installed by Busasa, when were they installed?
They were installed at the time of the break-in in 2014, around about 2014.
2014. But you say they were taken out at some
Yes.
stage?
Yes, Chair.
When was that? 2018?
2017, I think the end of 2017, Chairperson.
End of 2017?
2017, 2018
Yes,
is around
and
there.
then you put in ones that you bought for yourself.
Those had become very unreliable.
Yes,
They were, in my words, become obsolete.
yes,
I had been asking Mr. Watson to invoice me for a long time.
yes,
And when it became clear that I needed to upgrade, even of those upgrades, I asked them to remove their stuff and I put
yes,
superior,
Yes.
if you could put it, that equipment, yes, Chairperson.
Yes.
And that was in 2018.
yes. The removal was in 2017? or
I think it was the end of 2017, beginning of 2018.
Okay, all right. Mr. Noche?
But why did you not just come up front and say there were cameras installed by Busasa, but they had them removed? Why didn't you say that? Why did you not say that in this statement?
Perhaps I should have said that, Chairperson. I have no answer to that. I'm saying perhaps I should have said that there, but at the time when I made the statement, they were my ones. I could have said I initially had that and I put those ones in. Yes, I can't dispute that.
Mr. Smith, when were they, just be careful about this. Please be careful.
I beg your pardon.
Were the cameras not removed in October 2018 from your place?
No, Chair, they were not. They were not. I mean, I don't have the date, but they would not have been removed in October 2018 because I had my own cameras installed in 2018 for which I have invoices and proof of payments. So they were not removed in October 2018, Chairperson.
Were these cameras at your place, the ones installed by Busasa, not removed after this article appeared?
No, they were not.
All right.
No, they were not.
Turn to page 342.
Maybe before he does so, Mr. Smith, you know, this statement at the end of that paragraph, last paragraph of page 346 of the article.
I beg your pardon. Yes, I'm there. Yes.
Yeah, what you call the first page of the article. Yes. Yeah. That denial. One must look at it in the context of why you issued that statement. Is that right? As I understand it, you were responding, according to the document, to the allegations made by Mr. Agrizzi.
Correct, Chair.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Agrizzi, two of the allegations that Mr. Agrizzi had made against you were that one, Bosasa had paid for your daughter's tuition fees. Two, Bosasa had installed CCTV cameras at your home. All right. Now, in response to those allegations, you admit that, well, at least you say that Agrizzi, Mr. Agrizzi and yourself had a loan agreement in terms of which Mr. Agrizzi made certain payments to you, which you used for your daughter's tuition fees. That's the version you put up. And then with regard to the other allegation, namely Mr. Agrizzi's allegation that Bosasa also installed CCTV cameras in your home, you address that by saying, I deny any further assistance, financial or otherwise, including the installation of CCTV cameras at my home, from him or any other person or company. The cameras that are at my home were paid for by myself. That last sentence may be factually correct, may have been correct at that time, but remember, you are responding to specific allegations. And one of the allegations is Bosasa installed CCTV cameras in your home. So if you then make a sentence, a denial like this, it must mean you are saying the only thing that that Agrizzi did, the only thing that I know is the money which was the subject of the law. Any other thing, including the installation of CCTV cameras that Mr. Agrizzi is talking about, is not true. That's how I understand that if I look at the context. It may have been different if you were talking just in general and saying, well, Mr. Agrizzi and I had this loan agreement, and then you say, as for my situation at home, I've paid for my own CCTV cameras without responding to any allegations. One could understand that. But where you are responding to a specific allegation about Bosasa having installed CCTV cameras in your home, it's difficult to say you were not denying that in this statement. What do you say? Because you were responding to specific allegations. You are not just talking in general. If you meant to admit, if you meant to say, the cameras that are in my house right now were paid for by myself, but you did not intend to deny the allegation by Mr. Bosasa, by Mr. Agrizzi, that Bosasa had installed CCTV cameras in your house, one would expect you to say, I admit that indeed Bosasa did some time back install CCTV cameras in my house. These were the circumstances under which it happened. I asked Mr. Agrizzi or Mr. Gavin Watson or whoever for an invoice 2 times, 3 times. They never gave it to me. But as we speak now, those were removed, and the ones that are in my house were paid for by myself. That is what one would expect if the intention was not to deny what Mr. Agrizzi had said. What do you say to that?
It's very difficult at this point, Chairperson. What you are saying makes sense. Let me put it to you that way, that what you are saying makes sense, Chairperson. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, all right, thank you.
Now, Mr. Smith, I'm referring you to page 342. Are you there, Mr. Smith?
I beg your pardon.
Page
I'm
342.
sorry. I am there, Chairperson.
I'm terribly sorry, Mr. Notch and Mr. Smith. I'm going to take you back to something that we dealt with a long time ago, but it's because there's a question I should have asked and I keep on forgetting it and I don't want to forget it.
Yeah, that's fine,
and
Chair.
remember
That's all right.
only tomorrow. Please don't move away from the page where you are. I wanted to say to you, Mr. Smith, it seemed strange to me, I'm going back to the loan from Mr. Agrizzi. It seems strange to me that when you needed a loan on your version, you went to Mr. Agrizzi and not to Mr. Governor Watson, whom you had known for a long time, even before you went to Parliament. And the person that you would have known as effectively Mr. Agrizzi's employer, because he was the top person at Busasa. So I wondered why you didn't go to Mr. Watson, somebody that you had known for a long time. You went to this person that you hadn't known as long as that, as Mr. Watson, and somebody who maybe could be thought was likely to have more money than his employee, Mr. Agrizzi. You want to say something on that?
I tried to contextualize it earlier on.
Yes.
That at that period of 2015,
Yes.
we had a relationship
Yes.
ourselves.
Mr. Agrizzi and yourself.
Yes, by
Yes.
virtue of assisting the son getting a job and assisting my son,
Yes.
and so on. And it was, I guess, in that period that I just raised it with him. It was nothing planned or unplanned. I guess if
Yes.
Mr. Gavin Watson was at the time, I would have asked him probably, and anybody else.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Sorry, Mr. Nosh, I disturbed you in your plan.
No, Chair, no.
You
it's
can go
fine.
back to your plan now.
Look, I was taking you to that page. There is a photograph.
And that is 342?
342, Chair.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sure you have seen this photograph a number of times.
I have.
And this is a photograph at your home. And
That's correct.
I'm told this was a photograph of technicians taking down the cameras that had been installed by Busasa. Right.
Maybe we should start by asking the question, a prior question, who removed the Busasa CCTV cameras in 2017 or beginning of 2018? Because you said that they were removed in 2017 or early 2018. Who did the actual removing, and where were they taken? What happened to them?
No, I don't know who did the actual removal. I had requested Gavin Watson to remove them, Chairperson. So the individuals who did them,
Okay.
I'm not even sure if I was at home at the time, to be quite honest with you.
Okay, no, that's fine, okay. But at least, I think from what you say, whoever removed them, you expected that they would have been instructed by Mr. Gavin Watson to do so, or by somebody instructed by Mr. Gavin Watson.
Correct, Chairperson.
Yes, okay, all right. Mr. Nocha?
And the dates and time there on the screens, on the two screens, you see that?
I do, Chair.
What are the dates that are shown there?
1st of October 2018, and I think the second one is also the 1st of October, the 6th of October 2018.
And it seems as if on this screen, they were removed in October 2018.
Chairperson, these are screenshots of, I don't know where they came from.
Yes.
I am saying to the Commission
Yeah.
that I put my cameras in prior to these. I have got proof of payment thereof and the invoice thereof. Now,
Yes.
I am seeing this here now, Chairperson, and I'm not suggesting anything else, but I can prove
Yes.
that mine were installed now.
Yeah.
And it's not inconceivable that the dates and times on the recorder could not be in sync. It's not inconceivable, Chairperson. In fact, and I again speak under correction, there was a News 24 video, I think, around about this time, that exposed me, my security, by showing it. And I think that one also indicates a date of January, Chairperson. So, is this accurate? Is this doctored? It's a black and white picture. I want to say to the Commission, those cameras were removed in 2017/2018, Chairperson.
And Chair, actually to add to what Mr. Smith is saying, there is, actually I had not verified it properly, because the cameras also have got this tendency of using the American way of dates, starting with the month, and then, so it could be the 10th of January. In all fairness, it could be the 10th of January.
Yes, 2018.
And I wouldn't want
Yes.
Mr. Smith to commit himself
Yes.
on this one, in fairness.
Doesn't
to him.
Mr. Leroux say something about when they were removed?
He immediately says they were removed. It doesn't
It
give
doesn't
a date.
say when.
Yes. All he does, he recognizes the people
Yeah.
and the cars,
Yeah.
that they were Bosasa cars and the Bosasa person.
Yes.
But unhappily, it doesn't deal with the times of, the
Yeah.
dates of removal.
Yes.
But I wouldn't, it would be unfair to push
Yeah.
Mr. Smith to comment on,
Yeah.
when there's a possibility that it could be 10
Yeah.
January or.
Yes. No, that's fine.
Mr. Smith, let's move on to the affidavit of, the latest affidavit of Mr. Agrizzi. In it, Mr. Agrizzi has attached some SMS messages. Can we go to page 460?
What is the page number?
460, sure. Mr. Smith,
I am there, Chair.
Mr. Smith, Mr. Agrizzi attaches these.
1 second. Yes, continue.
Mr. Smith, before we deal with this, the context in which they are attached here, if you read the affidavit of Mr. Agrizzi, he wants to demonstrate to the Commission. He says, you continued to assist them. Now, the first one is on 460, and then it says Gavin Watson, and then it's 27 August 2016. Do you see that?
I do, Chair.
It says no further payments we need to have a meeting with them before we get too involved and embroiled in their fight with the FF. This is going to be ugly. Nomvula is being sucked in as one of the funders, which could backfire on us. Crow has also confirmed this, God bless. Do you know this?
What is this? Is this an SMS? Is this a WhatsApp message?
It's an SMS. Mr. Agrizzi referred to it as on page. Get picture now.
Is it Mr. Gavin Watson sending it to Mr. Agrizzi?
Just a minute, Chair. I will just go to. And he is on page 437, Chair. Mr. Agrizzi deals with, he says,
Yeah, just say what he says.
on 12.7, he says, Vincent Smith was knowingly fully assisting the late Gavin Watson and was in contact with the design makers.
Okay,
and people-
I'm sorry, Mr. Noche. I think Mr. Smith needs to see that and he couldn't find it. Just
sorry.
let's wait for him to find
Four
the
three-
page.
437.
Oh, I'm at 460. I thought you said 460.
No, he has found 460,
Or
but
you
he's
say
looking
the
for what I'm
affidavits.
reading, yes.
Okay. 437. Okay.
437.
437, yeah.
That is Mr. Agrizzi's affidavit.
Affidavit, yes.
Yes, I'm there, Chair.
Yes.
And if, at 12.7, he
Then
says,
maybe you can just read again, Mr. Noche, now that Mr. Smith
he
has
says
found
at
the page.
12.7, Vincent Smith was knowingly fully assisting the late Gavin Watson and Busasa and was in contact with the design makers and people at DCS. Annexures of messages are attached as AG1. Then AG1 is on 460, starts from 460.
Yes, you want to read 461 or 460?
460,
460,
there's
yeah.
a message, says on the 27th of August 2016, says no further payments when we need to have a meeting with them before we get too involved and embroiled in their fight with the FF. This is going to be ugly. Nomvula is being sucked in as one of the funders, which could backfire on us. Klo has also confirmed this. God bless. Do you know of this, Mr.
No, I have no clue what's happening here, Chairperson. I don't know what reference this has to me.
Yes. Okay.
And then over the page at 461,
Oh, but I think what you need to say, Mr. Okay, I think Mr. Agrizzi puts up this message as support for what he says in his affidavit. And what he says is that as at this time, we are talking August 2016, he says Mr. Smith was knowingly assisting Mr. Gavin Watson. You know what he says at page 437.
Yes, I do,
yeah.
Chair.
And he puts up this message as showing what was being discussed between himself and Mr. Gavin Watson. And I think he seeks to say, when you read what is said in this message, it's connected with Mr. Smith being involved. So you might wish to comment on that, whether this message supports that or not, as you understand it.
Chairperson, page 460 makes no reference to me, Chairperson. Yes, and I am indicating to you that I'm not aware what this was about, Chairperson.
Yes, yes. Okay.
no, that's fine, let's go over the page.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Smith, when I read this, bear in mind what the chair has put to you, that Mr. Agrizzi tried to show that you are working with them. Now, he says, it seems as if this is from Gavin.
This is from Gavin Watson to Mr. Agrizzi as well.
Yes, it says, yes.
Okay.
It says,
This is
Vincent,
AG 1.2
AG
at,
1.2.
Yes.
at page 461. Okay.
Says, Vincent Smith just got hold of me. He says, let's wait until Tuesday because he is having a meeting tomorrow with ZM and Small Burger. God bless. And then Agrizzi says, he called me as well. What he said was to continue the prep meetings, drafting documents, will convene on Tuesday at 1400 hours. Then review our approach and adjust the three-prong approach. But he didn't say we should halt it. Then he said, try to call you on WhatsApp. Do you see that?
I do see that, Chair.
Now your name is mentioned, and as Chair was putting it to you, Agrizzi is trying to prove that you are still working with them. They're talking about you.
I'm sorry, Chair, I never heard the question that.
I said,
The question is, Mr. Agrizzi is putting up this message to support his version or statement that even in 2016, you were still assisting them, and he used the word knowingly assisting Mr. Gavin Watson. And then he's putting up this message. It's a conversation between himself and Mr. Gavin Watson. But it's a conversation about you and them. So you need to be able to say, what do you have to say about Mr. Agrizzi saying, one, in 2016, you were knowingly assisting Mr. Gavin Watson, and saying this message supports what he's saying, that you were working with them on something.
First of all, I note my name here, Chairperson. It's a conversation between Gavin and Agrizzi. In response to your question, at that time I was no longer the Chairperson of Correctional Services. The Chairperson of Correctional Services, as I indicated earlier, I think was my senior. I would never undermine my senior by going to work with officials in a department where I am not the Chairperson. I understand what they're trying to say here, Chair, but I'm not privy to what it was that they were discussing here.
At that stage, how was your relationship with Mr. Agrizzi? How was your relationship with Mr. Gavin Watson, 2016?
My relationship with Mr. Watson was consistent until his untimely passing.
Yes, it was fine.
Yes. Mr. Agrizzi at that time, it probably was fine, Chairperson. I think that only after the 2018 that I took a decision not to, but at 2016, there had been no reason. So it had been as we'd been operating.
As before.
Yes, Chair.
Also, with Mr. Agrizzi, your relationship was fine?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, Chair.
Okay. Now, they make a reference there, or Mr. Gavin Watson makes a reference in his message to Mr. Agrizzi to ZM. Do you have any idea who ZM may have been?
I don't know who they're referring to, Chair, but if I had to speculate, I would assume that ZM would have been the National Commissioner at the time, Mr. Modise.
Mr. Modise.
Yeah, but I don't know.
Well, that's what comes to my mind as well, but they don't put the full name.
Yes, Chair.
Yes. And Mr. Smallbecker, do you have?
Smallberger is a senior manager, I think, in the department. I'm not sure what his responsibility is.
Yes. Okay. What Mr. Gavin Watson says is that, one, you got hold of him, you called him, you said they must wait until Tuesday because you were going to have a meeting the following day with ZM and Smallberger. If ZM referred to Mr. Modise, who was Commissioner of Correctional Services at the time,
yes,
and if Smallberger referred to Mr. Smallberger, who was also in Correctional Services at the time, it would appear that what they were saying is, what Mr. Gavin Watson was saying was, you said there was something that either you were working on with them or they were working on, which you said they must hold on because the following day you were going to have a meeting with ZM and Smallberger. That's the gist of the message. You accept that that's what it says.
I'm accepting that that's what the message is saying, Chairperson.
Yes. Okay, all right. And then Mr. Agrizzi, in response to Mr. Gavin Watson, says, he called me as well. What he said was to continue the prep meetings, drafting documents. We will convene on Tuesday at 1400 hours, then review our approach and adjust the three-pronged approach, but he didn't say we should halt it. Now, it seems to me that if indeed you had called Mr. Agrizzi, and if indeed you had said what he says you said, then what you said to him was that they must continue with preparations for meetings, and they must continue with drafting documents, and then there would be a review of an approach, and a three-pronged approach would be adopted. If that is true, it does seem to reflect that you were working on something with them. Would you accept that as a fair understanding of this? If it is true.
If it is true, it's a fair understanding, Chairperson.
Yes.
But I can.
Yes, yes. Yes, you maintain you know nothing about
Yes,
it.
Chairperson, I know nothing about it, and I've...
Yes. Are you able to say in 2016 there was nothing you were working with them on, or are you saying, or are you able to say there was something we were working on? I'm not sure if they are talking about it, but this is what we were working on, that I was working on with them.
No, Chairperson, in 2016, there was nothing that I could have been working with them on. As I indicated, the chairperson of the portfolio committee was somebody else. Yes. Unless there's context given to this. The reality is I've seen this thing this morning.
Yes. It doesn't seem to...
It doesn't resonate with me, Chairperson, of what exactly are they talking about here, and what is it that... I can also indicate to you that I don't recall ever meeting with Mr. Modise and Mr. Smallberger in 2016. I don't know why they would come to me when they have a chairperson. I don't know, Chair.
But let us say maybe whatever it is they were talking about, or let me put it this way, could there have been something that you may have been working with them on that may have had nothing to do with the Portfolio Committee on Correctional Services? Is there anything that you may have been working with them on that might not be what they are talking about, or is the position that for all intents and purposes, really, you were out of the Correctional Services Committee and you had nothing to work with them on, or could there have been personal matters that you were dealing with them at a personal level?
Chair, reading this, it refers to current, at the time, officials in the department.
Yes.
So I can't see me working on matters outside of that. It's just my reading of it. To answer your question, could it be something else?
Yes, okay, no thank you.
In fact, Mr. Smith, that SMS goes over and continues on page 463. Go to 463.
I am there, Chair. I'm sorry, I am there, yes.
Then it says, you remember in 461, Mr. Agrizzi says, try to call you on WhatsApp. Then over 463, he says, I agree. He said three-pronged approach. Our approach, Vincent's approach, Cedric's approach. When I said, wait, it is for the Monday, it is for meeting for Tuesday to give us more information how to approach this thing. This is why he is having a meeting with Smallberger to give us more information on what's taking place at DCS. Then Mr. Watson says, okay, understood, but by 8:30, I need, Agrizzi. Okay, understood, but by 8:30, I need confirmed drafting papers, otherwise we miss the deadline. I will send you an explanatory. You see that?
I do see, Chair.
Well, this part seems, when one reads it at page 463, seems to emphasize that they were certainly working on something, and whatever it is that they were working on, it was connected with DCS, which is Department of Correctional Services, and Mr. Smalbecker had something to do with it. And according to them, I take it that the reference to Vincent is a reference to you, because they have referred to Vincent Smith. And then they also refer to Cedric. They have not on these messages indicated the same name of this Cedric that they are referring to, but they are saying Vincent's approach and Cedric's approach. They talk about that approach. So it appears that certainly they are talking to each other about something that relates to the Department of Correctional Services, and they seem to reflect that you have an input on whatever it is they were discussing. Would that be a fair understanding?
That would be a fair interpretation of what the text says.
What the text says, yes.
Yes, it's a fair interpretation.
Yes, thank you.
May I?
Yes, sure.
This was reflected in, I think, Mr. Agrizzi's first affidavit, or one of those.
Yes, okay.
And in that one, it's very clear that he talks about Cedric Frolic.
Yes, okay.
On reading it the first time, I approached Cedric Frolic to say, this is what I'm reading here. Because I think he said he spoke to Cedric, and Cedric said something to him, or something to that effect.
Yes.
And I asked Mr. Frolic, or Cedric Frolic, what does this refer to? Cedric denies any of these things, that he never, or he's not aware of what is being said here. I certainly was not party to any planning with Cedric Frolic. I don't understand how would I. In 2016, Cedric Frolic, I think, was definitely chair of chairs. I was not in that department. So there would be a need for context in this thing, if any chairperson. But yes. I, as I'm standing here, I said to you, I approached Mr. Frolic on this matter. He denies having spoken to Mr. Agrizzi, so that, or saying to Mr. Agrizzi, I'll talk to Vincent, or I've discussed it with Vincent, or whatever the case might be. What is the context? He didn't understand the context. So from my side, I didn't follow it up any further. I certainly didn't meet with Mr. Smallberger and with Mr. Modise at any point in 2016 to discuss matters of DCS, because it would just be undermining the chairperson, the incumbent at the time chairperson. Because I would assume some point or the other he would have got wind that I'm talking to his departments or to officials of his departments, and I would not undermine my the chairperson in that fashion. So my plea is, I received this thing last night, though this morning.
Yeah.
If it is at all possible for somebody to elaborate on it, I'm prepared to respond in writing that says, this is the context. But I think at this point, my answer is, I don't know what they're talking about.
No, that's fine. I think after today, it may be necessary to call Mr. Agrizzi so that he can clarify the context of this, and you should be able to get an opportunity to react to it, Mr. Agrizzi's evidence after he has given context, and either by coming back for a short time to put your side of the story as you understand it after the context has been given, or by putting up an affidavit to say, I've heard what Mr. Agrizzi says about this, this is what I have to say about it. The one thing which may need to be borne in mind is that, as I understand the position from Mr. Agrizzi's evidence. At this time in 2016, or during 2016, Mr. Agrizzi is still working at Busasa. Mr. Gavin Watson is his boss, and I think they were in good terms, you know. And from what you have said, your relationship with each one of them had no problems. They are not writing something to give to a third party. They are talking between themselves as the CEO and COO of Busasa, I think. And they're talking about, they seem to be talking about something that they are working on. And then they mention your name, they mention somebody called Cedric, maybe that is Mr. Cedric Frolik. But Mr. Agrizzi might have to come and just give more context. But at that stage, the relationship between the two of them, that is Mr. Gavin Watson and Mr. Agrizzi, seems to have been fine, and their relationship individually and collectively with you seems to have been fine as well.
May I just say one
Yes.
thing? I agree, Chairperson, that
Yes.
that's fine.
Yes.
I would have, and I don't, like again, I say I don't understand what's happening here.
Yes,
But
yes.
my relationship with Mr. Gavin Watson is such that I'm sure he would have either copied me or,
Yes.
or there would have been
Yes.
something that said, I said that,
Yeah.
John said that, Vincent
Yes,
said that.
yes, yes.
That's all that I'm saying, Chairperson.
No,
because-
that's fine. And feel free, if you want to investigate these messages, you know, to do that as well. Because as you say, you are not copied, you don't know anything. So I'm simply emphasizing that it's important to hear fully your side about it. So when you do respond after Mr. Agrizzi has given context, feel free to look into it fully.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Mr. Noshwa?
Also, but are you saying, despite the fact that you've just got this now and you don't know this, you never had, in 2016, 2017, you never had any interaction with Mr. Modise or Small Beggar?
No, what I'm saying is that I never had a meeting. Now, the reality, Chair, is, because I don't want to be caught in a trap, when you travel to Cape Town on a Monday and there are officials going, chances are you'll bump into them or even yourself.
Yes.
When you travel on Tuesday, so
Yeah.
if I say to the Commission I never had any contact, and somebody locates me in the airport with them, I would have fallen foul. So
Yes.
I'm saying in relation to this matter,
Yes, you can't remember.
yes,
any-
Chairperson.
yeah,
So
yeah.
not that I never had any relationship
Yes.
with or bumped into
Contact,
them.
yeah.
But you are saying, according to this, you had planned to meet them on Tuesday, and you are saying,
No, he's not saying
I'm not
that.
saying that.
He's
no,
not
I'm saying the message.
Yeah, no, but you are saying he is saying.
Oh, did I? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. According to this message, the message seems as if to say that you are going to meet them on Tuesday. Am I right?
According to the message, that's correct, Chairperson.
Yes. But you say to the Commission now, you never had plans, and you never met Mr. Modise or Small Beggar. You had never planned to meet them on a Tuesday.
Well,
No,
he
Chairperson.
says, he says he can't remember whether he had any contact with them, but certainly he had no contact with them in regard to this matter. Am I right?
That's what I'm saying, Chairperson.
Yes,
And
yes.
also, if I may, Chair,
Yes, yes.
if this document had dates on it, that's why it's important to get the context,
Yes.
because it says Tuesday.
Yes, yes.
Which Tuesday are we talking about? If it gave us a date, it's
Yes.
also easy to indicate to you, Chair, that on Tuesday the 18th, I was
Yes.
in Cape Town or the
Yes.
Tuesday. All I'm
Yes.
asking for is that if this could be elaborated upon for me to give an intelligent answer.
Yes.
As it stands here, which Tuesday are they talking about?
No, that's fair enough, yeah.
No, I concede it's
Yeah.
fair to give more information.
Yeah.
Chair, on that, I do not have any further questions for the witness. What is left for me to do is to put together, go back and look at the individual exhibits, and then approach you either in here or in chambers, and then deal with those individuals if on those exhibits.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So you have no further questions?
I have no further questions for
Yes.
the witness, yes.
Are you going to seek a re-examination? Yes, okay, all right. How long do you think you might be?
10, 15 minutes at the most, yeah?
Yes, maybe we could take a short break and then come back of 10 minutes, and then then I'll give you time to re-examine. We adjourn now, we'll resume at 5:05. We adjourn.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Mr. Smith has requested an indulgence that at the end of my questions, if he can perhaps address you for about 3 minutes, just
No,
in terms of summing up how he understands his evidence.
That's fine.
Okay, Mr. Smith, if I can refer you to page 106 of the bundle you've been referred to.
106.
106.
Okay.
Are you there?
I'm there, Chair.
You will see there in paragraph 13 of your affidavit, you speak about your understanding of the Commission's terms of reference. And what I want to ask you is, in the context of the terms of reference of the Commission, did you at any point facilitate any unlawful awarding of tenders, whether it's Busasa or any other entity?
Sorry, Chair, I didn't get which paragraph you're talking about.
Sorry, paragraph 13 on
13.
Page 106 you are in. Eh?
Yes, Chair.
So paragraph 13, you'll see there's a, in bold, TOR 1.4, which refers to term of reference 104 of the Commission's terms of reference. Do you see that?
Yes, I do, Chair.
Now, I don't want to read the entire paragraph. In bold, there are words that read, by facilitating the unlawful awarding of tenders. Do you see that?
I do, Chair.
Now, what I'm asking you is, during your tenure as a member of Parliament, have you facilitated any unlawful awarding of tenders?
The answer, Chairperson, is no. I have not, even in going through my own evidence, seen any allegations to that effect. The second point that I want to make just on that one, as I had said earlier on, I don't believe that a portfolio committee or a member of Parliament, taking into consideration the separation of powers, would be able to meddle in the adjudication and awarding of tenders. So I have not facilitated any unlawful awarding of tenders.
Okay, I guess you would say you have not facilitated even lawful tenders.
I've never, any tenders, lawful or unlawful, Jefferson.
If you then go over leaf.
But before you go to your next question, your reference to the separation of powers is good if you are dealing with somebody who does not intend to do anything wrong. But if somebody intends to do wrong, intends to facilitate corruption, they wouldn't bother about the separation of powers, would they?
They wouldn't, I agree, Chair. They'll find
Yes.
means and ways of getting
Yes,
around it.
yes. Thank you.
Okay, if you can then go over leaf to page 107.
I am there, Chair.
The very first paragraph
Which
from
what
top,
page?
107, Chair.
Okay.
You will see one of the matters the Commission is seized with is to determine whether any member of the National Executive, in brackets including the President, public official, close brackets, and public official, functionary of any organ of state, influence the awarding of tenders to benefit themselves, their families, or entities in which they held personal interest. The question to you, Mr. Smith, is have you played any role in influencing the awarding of tenders to benefit yourself, your family members, or entities for personal interest?
No, Chair, I played no role in the awarding of tenders, legal or illegal.
Okay. Then you were referred to various minutes of the portfolio committee that you chaired, spanning the years 2009 to 2013. Mr. Agrizzi's testimony, in essence, suggested that prior to 2011, you were very opposed to Bosasa, and following a meeting that took place in Rivonia, which you've admitted to having attended, your stance on Bosasa softened. Now, having considered the minutes, although they arrived late yesterday, have you found anything that remotely suggests that there is a change in tone in how you applied yourself as the chairperson of the portfolio committee?
Chair, I think the first point that I want to make so that it's very clear is that neither me as an individual or the committee were anti-Bosasa. What we strongly objected to was the practice of outsourcing services, whether it was Bosasa, whether it was anybody else. So that is what we were anti. And that stance of being anti-outsourcing started when I was first elected chairperson in 2009, and it continued until the very last day that I was a chairperson. And the minutes, as council is alluding to, illustrates that very clearly, that there was no, all of a sudden after 2011, a softening, because that was the allegation, that mine was to make sure that the committee ensured that there was no negative publicity, for want of a better word, because that negative publicity would make it difficult for Bosasa to get further contracts. And that was the essence of the 45,000 rand. Our stance and my stance from 2009 till 2014 remained the same, that we were opposed and remain till the very end opposed to all sorts of outsourcing, including that Bosasa was doing.
Maybe let me ask this question as a follow-up to that. Question, let me ask this question. You pointed to certain parts of the minutes and said they reflected the committee's attitude against outsourcing. And you indicated that quite early in the life of your committee, as chair of the Correctional Services Portfolio Committee, 2009, 2010, you were informed of what seemed to be shocking corruption allegedly happening in the Department of Correctional Services involving Bosasa. Is that right?
That's correct, Chair.
Yes.
Sorry.
Now, if one goes through the minutes of the meetings of your committee from 2009 to 2014, and I know that what we have is not all the minutes, but I would like to have them, and I'm going to ask you later on what role you can play to getting us those minutes. Would one find an emphatic attitude from the committee that said no to this corruption at the Department of Correctional Services involving Bosasa or any company? Would one find something in the minutes over the years that you were horrified as a committee that Bosasa continued to get tenders or continued with the getting contracts from the Department of Correctional Services and that you were saying to officials of the department, why can't you stop this corruption? Why can't you stop these contracts? Or is the position that you would say your stance against outsourcing was effectively your stance against corruption?
So yes, I think even in these minutes, and I speak under correction,
Yes.
I think there are at least 3 areas that, if I remember, just from
Yes,
this morning's
was
discussion,
earlier. Yeah, there was earlier.
where it alluded to members that were there even prior, who said it is the most horrific report that, I think it was the SI report at the time. Another area was, I think, with the access control or something, Chairperson, where we were very emphatic, whether it was an individual putting the point, but adopted ultimately by the committee. To the extent, Chairperson, where almost every meeting where we had budget preparations or strategic plans, our question always was, when are you going to take over the core functions of correctional services and not outsource them? Chair, there was a massive debate in our time about the wisdom or otherwise of private prisons, which is also a form of outsourcing, Chairperson. So yes, I have no doubt that if we went through all the minutes, at any given point where this thing was discussed, it's very unambiguous that the entire committee just did not support it, Chairperson. Many a time, we were told that to change tech immediately might create a problem because we don't have the capacity as the department. But we were not ambiguous of you have to find that capacity at some point, Chairperson. So yes, we were throughout my tenure anyway, and I'm sure it could be borne out in the minutes.
Okay, now I will come back to it. I'll allow your counsel to finish because I will come back to it and talk about it.
Thank you, Chair. During your testimony earlier, the Chair asked you whether you would accept that the loan arrangements between yourself and Mr. Agrizzi were risky, considering that he had nothing to hold on to. Do you recall that?
I recall that, yes.
Now, as I understand it, the development, the property development you're referring to, is a fairly well-known development. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
Is it also correct to assume, or rather to conclude, that you would have informed Mr. Agrizzi about which development you were referring to?
Yes, I would have, and I think at some point, even in his affidavit, he alluded to the development project that we were talking about, Chairperson. So I think he was quite aware where the investment had taken place. And
so he would have possibly taken comfort in the fact that that type of development your investment was in is likely to yield the investment return you were hoping for in 8 years' time.
I would think that he would have taken comfort in that, Chair, but I don't want to speak on behalf of anybody. But ordinarily,
you don't know it for sure, but you say.
But ordinarily, people would look at that, and it has been borne out over and over that it was a less risky investment than most other investments, property development.
If I can refer you to page 470.
I am there, Chairperson.
That is the email that you sent to Mr. Agrizzi on the 11th of May 2015. Now, there was much asked about what appears to be a clandestine arrangement in respect of this loan agreement. If you can just read for the chairperson's benefit the second paragraph in that email, please. Smith.
The paragraph that starts with I.
Yes.
I am in the process of sorting out the funding requirements for her and hereby request any assistance in this regard. Funds can be deposited directly with the institution if that is more acceptable, and I have thus attached relevant documents through correspondence. Kind regards.
So to the extent that there may have been an intention to conceal this arrangement, you would not have been open to the idea of a payment being made directly to the institution, is that correct?
That's correct, Chairperson. More than that, if there was, I'm talking for myself, if there was an attempt for concealment, I wouldn't even want to have an arrangement where the transactions had any audit trail. I would have looked for another means, but yes, if the fact that I've said pay directly, for me is an indication that it was a legit above board and I think an honest request from my side, Chair.
Mm-hmm. And then if you go to page 335.
Of course, if it's paid directly to the institute, to the university, apart from you and Mr. Agrizzi or Busasa, it's only the people at that university who may have known who paid for you. And they are out of South Africa. You accept that?
That's true, Chair. I mean,
yes.
that would have been even more foolproof, if you want to call it hiding of it, because nobody else would have known if it went directly. It would not have gone through any records that could be linked to me, Chairperson.
Yes, but the point I'm making is that that made it more unlikely. It made it more unlikely that anybody who could pursue anything would know that you had been assisted by Busasa or Mr. Agrizzi, because it would be people in Wales who know who paid, whereas if the payment maybe was within for a university within the country, and if it was reflected that the payment was from Busasa, that might raise eyebrows even within the university, and that would be internal, and the information could be leaked. And the next thing you know, it's in the media that Busasa paid for Mr. Smith's daughter's fees as the tuition fees, whereas because you were dealing with an institution that's overseas, it was unlikely that anybody there would know anything about Busasa. They receive the money and that's it.
I agree.
You accept that?
I accept that, Chairperson.
Yes. Okay.
And so it's 355 actually, not 335, 355.
355.
Yes.
I am there, Chairperson.
So the transaction itself into Euroblitz was on the 6th of August, 2016. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chairperson.
So this reference to, again, a car accident settlement, which implies an attempt by somebody to conceal the true nature of the payment. At the time of receiving the payment, you were not aware of the reference attached to the payment, is that correct? As in on the 6th of August?
That's correct, Chair.
Because the statement, if you go a page before, a page before on 354, is a statement that only came out on the 31st of August, 2016. So you only really would have become aware of the description attached to the payment only some 20 odd days later. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
Chair, that is the bulk of the questions I had for Mr. Smith.
Okay,
Thank you for the indulgence.
Thank you very much. Mr. Smith, I may have just a few questions, and some of them relate to the question of oversight, parliamentary oversight. And I'm sure by now you have a good idea that it's a subject that this commission is very interested in, just from what we have said in the public domain. One of the concerns that I have with regard to Busasa and all the allegations of corruption and the evidence of corruption that has been given to the Commission about Busasa and Department of Correctional Services, Department of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, and other departments, is how it was possible for a company against whom there were such serious allegations of corruption over many years, how it was possible for that company to continue getting more contracts and more contracts, jobs from government departments, and no prosecution of the company and no prosecution of anybody within the company about such corruption. I mean, from what you have said, when you came into the Portfolio Committee of Correctional Services in 2009, you indicated that the committee that had been there before had been grappling, as I understand, with allegations of corruption involving Busasa in the previous years before that. But we know that nothing seems to have been done in terms of prosecution of anybody in Busasa until at least 2019. So from around, 2005, 2006, I'm not sure, to 2009, from 2009 to 2014, during your time, that 5-year period, and beyond after 2014, Busasa just continued getting a lot of contracts and having some contracts extended within government departments. Nothing seemed to be happening. Nobody was stopping this thing. That concerns me to say, what were people who were supposed to prevent this doing? Where were they? What were they doing? And when I ask that question, I also look at Parliament and say, but Parliament has got portfolio committees that relate to various government departments. What did they do about this? What mechanisms were there at their disposal to stop this thing if they wanted to stop it? Was it a problem of there being no mechanisms, or was the problem that of no willingness or commitment to stop this corruption at the Department of Correctional Services? You may or may not be able to say something about it, but that's one of my concerns, and I certainly want to ask you whether after today you might be willing to assist the Commission in any way by putting together documentation to say, during your time as chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Correctional Services, 2009 to 2014, these are the issues that came to your attention about correctional services as a committee. This is what you did about these things. Maybe in hindsight, you see that there are many others you didn't look at, which you should have looked at. Maybe these are the reasons why you didn't look at them. But this is what your committee did. And one of the questions I would be interested in is, when in 2010, you had this presentation from the SIU which shocked all of you about what was happening. How did it happen that 5 years later, when you got out of the committee, Busasa was still just continuing, and so on and so on. So that you might wish to say something now about what I'm saying, but you might wish to say, I'm willing to assist the Commission in the way that has been suggested, and maybe I would prefer to deal with this substantively when I've looked at everything that we may have been doing, we did, and so on.
No, Chair, I'm more than willing to assist the committee in terms of my experience and my institutional memory.
Yes, yes.
I will certainly try and put a paper or something together.
Yes, yes.
But Chair, and this is a self-criticism when I'm raising it, because I was in the system at the time.
Well, I must say, before you say that we need a lot of people who are able to self-criticize, because I think a lot of things in our country are not going right because people don't want to self-criticize. They are averse to any criticism. And yet, criticism can be very important in order to improve. Yes.
Yes, Chair. I wanted to say that I'm part of it. That I think in the former years, certainly since I've been in Parliament, we were accused of being a very docile Parliament at the time. Because I think there was an overemphasis of yours is only to recommend or to make suggestions without any, even the Auditor General, Chair, and I've been to at least 3 of them. All of them lamented the fact that they, year in, year out, reported on what we called in my time serial offenders, the things you're talking about, people who continually did everything. And all we could do, whether it was public accounts or a portfolio committee, was to go and write a report to the House and say, this is ours. Because portfolio committees on their own are subdivisions, if you want to call it, of Parliament. It's the Speaker and Parliament as a whole who would request some sort of intervention. And I think that was the problem then, Chair. I can indicate now that, for instance, we've strengthened the Auditor General tremendously. I think there's a greater awareness, even from committees, SCOPA and everybody, that we need to put pressure in terms of asking tough questions, in terms of being on top of and doing proper follow-up on these type of things. See, I think, in all honesty, Parliament today is a totally different animal to Parliament when I joined it, in terms of oversight and so on. But there is a long way to go. And with correct political will, which I think is probably there now with the current Speaker and other people, I would expect that things will continue to improve. But Chair, it's a journey. It's not an event. It'll take a change of culture in even how as portfolio committees. But I think we need to keep on raising the flag, keep on raising our concerns, keep on self-criticizing, and eventually we'll reach there, Chairperson. But I think it is doable, but I don't think it's going to be doable tomorrow.
Yes. Well, I would like to believe that there is a change of attitude, but I'm not sure about it. I have an observation which may or may not be correct about Parliament, namely that when there is a new president in the country, in terms of parliamentary oversight, sometimes one gets the perception that, at least in the past, one would get the perception that members of Parliament, certainly from the ruling party side, would treat that president and maybe his ministers, I must say he's only, because we have only had male presidents, in a certain way, which might be different from the way they treat that president and some of his ministers, maybe towards the end of that president's second term. So, and an outsider like me looking inside, looking from outside, says, oh, so maybe when they know this president is not going to be there in the next, after the next elections, the attitude changes. But at the beginning, there seems to be an approach that seems to handle the executive very softly. I may be wrong, but if you observe, I think towards the end of President Mandela's time, towards the end of President Mbeki's time, towards the end of President Zuma's time, certainly there seemed to be, it probably doesn't mean with everybody, but maybe just some. You know. But I think that what is important is that we need to try and see whether the oversight mechanisms that Parliament has are adequate, number one. Number two, in order for them to do a proper job. Number two, what can be done to make sure that when a member of a portfolio committee or a member of Parliament needs to perform oversight functions, needs to ask difficult questions to members of the executive, whether it's the president or a minister, or in a portfolio committee, a DG, they feel that they can ask them those difficult questions without fearing that they might be labeled as if they are opposition members of Parliament, to say, why do you ask our minister as if you are a DA member? Don't you know this is our minister? Well, why are you behaving like an opposition member? We need to look at what it is that can be put in place that will enable even members of the ruling party in Parliament, because they are in the majority, to perform that function properly, even if, or despite the fact that the minister may be in the same party as them and so on, and the president, and that even the ruling party doesn't make people feel that if you ask too many questions of our ministers, you are behaving like an opposition party member.
Chair, I'll make an undertaking to include it in the assignment that you've given me, but just up front.
Yes.
I can indicate to you, Chair, that we have, when I was a member of Parliament, and I guess it's the same now, lamented the fact that Parliament is woefully undercapacitated relative to the executive.
Yes, yes.
A member of Parliament has no support.
Yes, yes.
A department has access to all sorts of support. So it's very difficult for somebody to be able to read up and do real oversight if you don't even have a researcher. And the department can call on everybody else. So I'm saying, Chair, it is never going to happen until you capacitate Parliament.
Yeah.
I know that if you compare our MPs to MPs in Germany or everywhere else, just from a capacity point of view, it's chalk and cheese. So I'm saying those are the kinds of things that I would try and put in this paper if you ask me to do them, but it's that kind of thing that I think would be allowing us to go to the next level of oversight, the capacity of members of Parliament.
Yes. No, I think that's a very important part as well, because you might have the commitment. If you don't have capacity, you are going to be hampered. If you have capacity but you don't have the commitment, the capacity doesn't help, doesn't serve its purpose, so you need to have both. But to the extent that in assisting the Commission on this assignment, you need any assistance from the Commission, there will be people who can assist. If in terms of drawing affidavits or whatever, there will be people that can assist. I think you can make contact with the legal team, the evidence leaders here, or your lawyers can make contact. And there is somebody that is looking at that issue, and they can assist. But I just want to say before I leave that subject that earlier this year, the Commission wrote to almost all the political parties who were represented in Parliament before the 2019 general election. Same letter, and that includes the ruling party, but everybody, and it was saying, one of the areas that the Commission is looking at is precisely this, to say, to the extent that we can all see that a lot of wrong things have happened in various government departments and SOEs over the past years. One of the things we need to look at is where was Parliament when these things were happening, because they had a constitutional obligation for oversight. What did they do? Did they have enough mechanisms to deal with these challenges? Or is it a problem of capacity? Or is it a problem of whatever mechanisms, oversight mechanisms they were not enough to deal with these problems? We said to the various political parties, tell us what your members of Parliament, what their experiences have been with regard to trying to perform oversight over the executive over the years. Tell us if you think the mechanisms of oversight were not adequate. Make suggestions or recommendations as to what should be done to make sure that Parliament will be able to exercise its oversight functions effectively. But unfortunately, I've heard that apparently one of the parties didn't get the letter, but not a single one of the political parties has shown interest in that. And it's difficult to think all these political parties didn't receive those letters. Actually, those letters were sent twice. First, they were sent before the lockdown started, and later on, they were sent again to say, in case you didn't get them, they were sent. But there seems to be no interest, and it's very difficult to understand why it is that they would not be interested in something so important to their function. I've spoken to the Speaker of Parliament and the Chairperson of the NCOP. They are fully committed to assisting the Commission in regard to those matters, and they will be assisting, but I'm just saying I would have expected the political parties themselves to be interested, but it doesn't look like. So, but I'm very grateful that you are prepared to assist in whatever way you can. I think the only other matter I want to mention, and again, you might not be able to say anything. You know, if Mr. Agrizzi's evidence before this commission is true, or some of it, if it's true, one gets the impression that Bosasa may have wanted to capture some people in Parliament, legislature, some people in cabinet, and even the president during President Zuma's time. I'm saying this because they've given evidence, Mr. Agrizzi gave evidence about alleged payments that he said were being made by Bosasa to the Jacob Zuma Foundation through Mr. Dumieni, that if I understand Mr. Agrizzi's evidence correctly, were meant to, for the then president. And then, of course, he has given evidence about some people, some ministers. He has given evidence about people in the legislation. It may well be that if his evidence is true, Bosasa sought to do this. Again, it's something that you might not be able to say anything about.
No, certainly, there's nothing I can say about it, Chairperson.
Yes,
because as you say, those are allegations and so on. But
yeah.
I suppose at some point,
Yeah.
very much like this exercise, we can learn lessons from.
Yes. No, thank you very much. There's nothing arising, Council, from this? Nothing. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. I think you wanted to say something for a few minutes. I give you that chance now.
Chair, thank you very much for this opportunity. It's really just 4 brief points that I would want to put to contextualize my understanding and my participation. The first point that I wish to raise, Chairperson, is that immediately that these allegations surfaced in September 2018, I, as a person, voluntarily stepped down because I didn't want to contaminate Parliament any further, but also because I was informed by the resolutions of the ANC at Nasrec that rather step aside until you've had this kind of opportunity to do it. So I wanted to put it on record that I voluntarily stepped down and allowed for the process. I think the second point, Chairperson, and we probably canvassed it earlier on, that I would like to leave, is that personally my relationship with the late Gavin Watson precedes my being a member of Parliament, and it spans over almost 25 years, Chairperson, until his untimely death. So it was not a matter of me and the late Gavin knowing each other from 2019. And as we alluded to, that it was born from the ANC's program of rebuilding organization and rebuilding communities. And we had to go to people who were able to assist us. So that is how my relationship with Gavin Watson, or that's the relationship that I had with Gavin Watson until his untimely death. And I wouldn't want the impression created that it was just a 2019 or a 1999 exercise. And then the third point, and again, you also cautioned me against it, Chair, is that I wanted to talk about the intention of this separation of powers, to be able to say nobody interferes in anybody and everybody is independent. And if operated the way it was intended, I think it will go a long way, that I can't dictate to the judiciary and so on. Because if that is working, Chairperson, then no member of Parliament would be able to even go near adjudicating of tenders and so on and so forth. And I thought I wanted to put that on the table that says it's true even for MPs. If you believe in the separation of powers, I can't get involved in the day-to-day work of the department. I also wanted to say, Chairperson, that I think that the system that Parliament uses of portfolio committees, where the media is able to have access, where any civil society organization or even the public has access, where there are multi-party members in that committee, bodes well because of transparency. So it can't be anything. Even almost all committee meetings today are publicized live. So I think it brings out transparency. And it will make it very difficult, if not impossible, for a single individual or political party to dictate or impose his or her will on the functioning of Parliament. By the way, committees are the engine room of Parliament. So I think that transparency bodes well. Chair, the This morning we discussed but we went through what I thought when I received them last night were all the minutes where there was a reference to Bosasa. And I'm raising it, Chairperson, because there was an impression created, rightly or wrongly, I'm not even talking about the merits of it, that there is this individual who was very anti. He then has a meeting and he becomes very pro to the extent that he works even after he's left the portfolio committee. And I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong, that's yours, Chairperson, but I don't think the minutes that we discussed, at least these that we discussed now, the facts that we discussed don't bear out that perception. I thought I want to put it on the table, Chair, that at least from my side, I'm happy that it was a blessing in disguise that those minutes came late last night, because I would not have had the opportunity to prove to you that my attitude and that of the department didn't change, Chair. So, to that extent, Chair, I'm hoping that what came out today and this debunking of that narrative that Smith or others were up for cash, I'm hoping that when you look at the report or anybody else, you take that into consideration. I want to end, Chair, by saying that I did not have the authority, and neither did any member of Parliament have the authority to award or to influence who got tenders or contracts in the department. That I never once enabled any undue or illegal awarding of tenders. Personally, I never once influenced undue or illegal tenders to any individual or to any company or to any institution. That is mine. The Chair will, and other people will be the judge of that ultimately. And I thought that if I said that, Chairperson, at least there will be closure from my side in terms of, I hope you understand where it is. And I thank you for your indulgence, Chair.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Smith, and thank you for coming to give evidence to the Commission, and thank you in advance for the assistance you are going to give to the Commission with regard to the performance of oversight functions by the Correctional Services Portfolio Committee from 2009 when you were chairperson up to 2014 when you were chairperson, so as to give the Commission more light and more information into what kind of issues in relation to correctional services the committee was aware of, what kind of information it asked for, what kind of decisions, if any, it made about those matters, and what steps it sought to be pursued to deal with the problems. Thank you very much. You are excused now.
Thank you.
Thank you. I must thank everybody for their cooperation, for us to be able to sit until this time in order to finish. We appreciate that very much. We are going to adjourn. Next week, the Commission will be hearing evidence relating to ESCOM, in particular the suspension of various executives. And that's what the Commission will be dealing with next week. We adjourn.